Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing up the back stairs of an Edwardian great house at 6:20 in the morning into one of the most quietly demanding jobs in the entire aristocratic machine, the lady's maid. Not a parlour maid, not a housekeeper, the woman who laced the corset, heated the tongs, saved her mistress's shed hair into a ceramic pot, and knew every secret the body and the wardrobe between them could produce. If a slow hour of corsets, hairpins, and an absolutely shocking number of layered petticoats sounds like the right place to wind down, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if this is genuinely where you want to spend the next hour of your life. Big thanks tonight to the viewer who dropped this topic in the comments. I've been looking forward to it. Leave a comment telling me where in the world you are and roughly what hour your local clock says, and tell me if you've ever held a job that required this level of access to another human's undergarments. Dim the lights, turn the fan on low, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your arms in because we're about to spend a lot of time in a room that smells of violet powder and scorched hair, and muscle memory is real. Have you ever wondered, exactly, how long it takes to dress a wealthy Edwardian woman before 9 in the morning? What a 22-inch waist feels like from the back when you're the one pulling the laces? How did you build a hairstyle out of a woman's own shed hair, collected over weeks into a small ceramic pot, rolled into a shape, and then hidden inside the real thing? Did the iron have a setting? Did it have instructions? Was there a manual? Or did you just spit on it and hope? Could you track 30 trunks across 3 countries, correspond with couturiers on Grosvenor Street, manage a quiet laudanum dependency, and still have the correct gown pressed and ready by 7:30? What happened to your career if your mistress decided, one morning, that she simply didn't care for you anymore? And what, exactly, do you do with a £40 worth gown on your half-day off? Congratulations. You've just woken up in an Edwardian country house. England, 1903. It's 6:15 in the morning. The tongs are cold. The mistress isn't awake yet, but you are, and that's the whole point. Good luck. You wake at 6:30, in the dark, in a narrow bed 3 floors above where your mistress is still sleeping. She will wake when you have made the room ready for her to wake into. That is the arrangement. You dress quickly, pin your own hair, and descend the back stairs without making the 3rd step from the top creak, because the 3rd step from the top always creaks. The dressing room is cold. You light the gas. You start the day half an hour before she has begun to dream that she is finishing hers. The dressing room is not large. It sits between her bedroom and the wardrobe room, and it belongs, technically, to her. You are in it more than she is. The fitted pale wood wardrobes line one wall, each gown sheathed in muslin, lavender bags tucked between layers like small calm opinions. The dressing table holds her ceramic hair tidy, a wide-mouthed pot, the colour of milk, where the combings go. Every morning, every evening, every time you draw a brush through her hair, the loose strands come out on the bristles and you roll them between your fingers and add them to the tidy, because they'll be needed. She doesn't ask about this. It's understood. The tidy is filling towards something, the way a savings account fills, except at the end you get a hairpiece instead of a house. Let's talk about the curling tongs. They heat over a spirit lamp, a small brass flame that smells faintly of alcohol, and something slightly scorched underneath the rosewater the room holds all morning. You test the temperature the same way every time. Hold the tong near your cheek, not touching. If you can feel the heat at half an inch, you wait. If you can't, you wait differently. There is no gauge, there is no instruction card. There is only the cheek, the half inch, and the fact that scorched hair on Lady Somebody's temples 1 hour before she receives morning callers is not a recoverable situation. The tongs are patient, capable, and reliably unforgiving. Neither is she. The iron, at least, has a test you can demonstrate. You spit lightly on its flat surface. A sharp, aggressive hiss means too hot. That iron goes nowhere near her silk stockings. 4 to 6 shillings a pair from Swan and Edgar, which is roughly 1/3 of what a kitchen maid earns in a week. A slower, gentler evaporation means correct. You have done this 10,000 times. Your wrist knows the difference before the sound finishes. Marguerite, the under-housemaid who occasionally passes through, watches you do it once and looks mildly horrified. as if you'd just performed minor surgery in the laundry. By 7:15 you have heated the room, laid out the mourning pieces in order, chemise first, then the corset, then the combinations, and positioned the small chair she'll hold during lacing. The corset is whalebone and steel, boned to a target of 20 to 22 inches, give or take a held breath. You lace from the back, pulling in measured increments while she grips the chair rail. She says nothing during this. You say nothing during this. The chair rail has a slight groove worn into the paint on the left side, from the grip, which tells you that this arrangement predates you. The rest of the dressing takes between 30 minutes and an hour, depending on the day's first engagement and her mood. Hooks and eyes on the bodice, small enough that a finger without callus can't manage them cleanly, and your fingers have the calluses. You work from the bottom up, every hook seated before you move. The whole process is less like dressing a person and more like assembling something load-bearing. She will be ready by 8:30. Breakfast is at 9. You will not eat until after she has. The dressing room holds the last of the spirit lamp smell and the faint sweetness of the lavender bags, and somewhere 2 floors below, the faint ammonia rise from the butler's pantry where the silver gets its weekly opinion about its own existence. The house is waking up around you, and you are already here. You set the curling tongs into the small blue flame of the spirit lamp on the corner of the dressing table. They must heat completely through without overheating, because overheated tongs scorch hair, and scorched hair is the kind of mistake that follows a maid through every registry office in London. You sit on the velvet stool and wait, watching the metal. The smell of methylated spirit rises off the lamp, sharp and faintly chemical. You will know the tongs are ready when the heat reaches your wrist from 6 inches away. The Gibson Girl hairstyle, which is what every fashionable woman in 1903 is attempting to approximate, requires significant infrastructure. Specifically, it requires a pompadour so full and soft that it appears to float slightly above the head, as though the hair has aspirations of its own. What's actually holding it up is the rat. The rat is a small padded roll hidden inside the arrangement, and it is made from the mistress's own combings, hair collected from the silver-backed brush and tucked into the ceramic tidy on the dressing table, strand by strand, over weeks. You made it. You manage it. It lives in a drawer. Emile Long on New Bond Street offers courses specifically for ladies' maids wanting to master the technique, 1 to 3 guineas per series, depending on how many disasters they've already caused. Harrods will sell you a ready-made hairpiece set for 7 and 6 if you haven't the patience to build your own. Most maids build their own. The mistress prefers it. There is something about a woman's hair being propped up by her own previous hair that she finds less troubling than the alternative, which is someone else's. The tongs themselves are long-handled, scissor-jointed, and reliably uncalibrated. They are heavy, awkward, and quietly self-confident. They have no temperature gauge. There is no temperature gauge. You test them by holding your wrist near the barrel, not touching, near, and making a judgment based on the warmth you feel at 6 inches. Then you make a second test by touching a fold of brown paper which scorches at roughly the threshold too hot for silk. Neither test is exact. The iron you tested this morning with spit. The tongs you test with wrist and paper and something that has no formal name but amounts to accumulated confidence in your own hands. Missus. Hartwell, the head housemaid 2 positions below you, calls it experience. The cook calls it luck. The tongs don't weigh in on the debate. You section the mistress's hair with a bone-handled comb starting at the crown. Her hair is fine and tends toward the flat. Without the rat and the tongs together, the Gibson silhouette doesn't hold past noon. You work in sections, rolling each around the barrel, holding for a count you've calibrated over months, releasing. The curl drops into a soft wave. You work quickly. Overheating is always closer than it looks. There is a half second between correct and scorched where all the outcomes are still available, and then there isn't. A maid named Agnes, in a house in Belgrave Square that you heard about through the registry, scorched her mistress's fringe in front of a Tuesday morning caller. The character she received at the end of that month described her as adequate in general duties but insufficiently attentive. 12 words. That's what 3 years of correct work costs you if the tongs get away from you once. Agnes was in dressmaking by spring. The character reference is a single sheet of notepaper written in one woman's hand, kept in the secretaire, and final. There is no appeals committee. You hold the tongs at the correct distance and count. The dressing table in front of you holds rose water in a cut glass bottle, violet powder in a flat tin, a tortoiseshell rat-tail comb, 2 spare pins, and the ceramic hair tidy, which is already collecting this morning's combings. Nothing on the table is yours. You use all of it. You arrange the dressing table in the order she likes it arranged. Brushes left, combs right, rose water uncapped and turned, so the label faces the mirror. The ceramic ewer is filled. The towels are warmed against the small fire. The silver-backed boar bristle brush is placed exactly where her hand will find it without looking. None of this is written down anywhere. You learned it by being corrected once on each item and never being corrected on the same item again. The room is ready now. She is not yet awake. The dressing table is not your table. The brushes are hers, the combs are hers, the rose water is hers, and even the small ceramic tidy holding 2 weeks of her saved combings is technically hers. You clean the bristles with a flat comb and a soft cloth every 3rd morning. You wipe the silver backs with a paste of whiting and ammonia that comes up from the butler's pantry in a small jar, smelling like a very confident decision. The table is your jurisdiction the way a hotel room is a housekeeper's jurisdiction, completely and not at all. On the left side, the brushes, the combs, the hand mirror with the monogram facing up. On the right, the perfume bottles in height order, tallest to the back. The violet powder in its flat box, the small pot of cold cream, the pin tray, which is never empty because you refill it every morning from the supply you keep in your apron pocket. A lady running low on pins at the wrong moment is a theoretical problem you have preemptively solved every single day since 1903. The pin tray doesn't know this. It just sits there, smug, ready, and reliably blameless. Let's talk about the spirit lamp. It lives at the far left corner of the table during dressing hours, and it makes a small, slightly acrid smell. Methylated spirits underneath the rose water, underneath the powder, underneath whatever she's already put on her wrists. You light it before she wakes. The curling tongs sit in its flame for approximately 4 minutes, which you measure by habit rather than clock. Because there is no clock in the dressing room, you're permitted to consult with any regularity. 4 minutes is warm enough. 5 minutes is a conversation you don't want to have. You learn this the way you learn everything in this room, by paying extremely close attention to what happens when you don't. She arrives in her wrapper at 7:15, sometimes 7. Once, memorably, 6:40, without warning or apology, in a mood that suggested the night had not gone well and the morning would not be asked to compensate. A kalfa in a Turkish household gets a bell. You get whatever footsteps sound like through a shared wall and a professional instinct for the difference between the footstep that says good morning and the footstep that says don't. Morning dressing takes 30 minutes on a quiet day. On a day with appointments, it takes 45. The sequence is fixed. Chemise first, then the corset, then the combinations, then the corset cover, then the petticoats, 2 of flannel in winter, 1 of cambric in summer, then the skirt, then the bodice, then the hooks and eyes. Your fingers close them the way a pianist runs, scales, without looking down, while she's still deciding whether the blue walking dress or the grey one better suits a morning that has already, it seems, made up its mind. The waist target is 22 inches. Some mornings it is in fact 22 inches. Other mornings it is 22 inches in the sense that 23 can be argued into a corset with enough patience and a firm grip on the laces. She holds the bedpost. You pull. Neither of you discusses what is happening. You know her body in a way her husband almost certainly doesn't, and neither of you acknowledges this fact directly, ever. By 7:50 she is dressed. By 8 she is at breakfast and you are back in the dressing room, folding the wrapper, replacing the spirit lamp cover, straightening the pin tray. The pin tray is shallow, brass, and quietly grateful for the refill. The room doesn't reset itself. It just looks like it does. You lace her corset from behind while she holds the bedpost with both hands. She inhales, lifts her ribs, holds. You pull. The fashionable waist this season is 20 to 22 inches and you are aiming for the lower number. The corset is boned with steel and whalebone and laced with cotton tape so strong it has never once broken in your hands, which is a comfort, because if it broke the morning would unravel from there. You pull again, slowly and steadily, with both hands braced against the small of her back. She does not speak. The boning does most of the work. Your job is the tension, measured, steady, and quietly inflexible, managed the way you manage most things in this room, with precise and invisible effort. The corset, to its credit, has never broken. She releases the bedpost. She exhales what little she can. She looks at her reflection the way you have watched her look at her reflection every morning for 2 years, which is not admiringly, exactly. More like checking a document for errors, then the rest. Over the corset goes the corset cover, cambric, trimmed, tucked, then the combinations, then the petticoats, one flannel, one cambric, each tied at the waist in a specific order she specified when you started and has not revisited since. Then the skirt, then the bodice. The bodice has hooks and eyes so small they are essentially theoretical. Missus Whitmore, the housekeeper on the 3rd floor, once called them the hooks of malice, and she was not wrong. Your fingers managed them in under 4 minutes. They took 22 the first week. You counted. She is dressed. The whole operation has taken 40 minutes, which is average for a Tuesday with no particular social obligation before 11. A ball night runs longer. A morning when she slept badly runs longer for different reasons, which is to say she doesn't hold the bedpost so much as grip it, and you don't pull so much as negotiate. And yet the dressing is only half of it. Hair comes before or alongside, depending on her mood, and mood is something you read the same way you read iron temperature, not with instruments, but with accumulated attention to small signs. A certain angle to the shoulders means you do not hum. A particular stillness at the mirror means you work faster. You know her body's moods better than her doctor does. Her doctor visits twice a year. You visit twice a day, minimum. The Gibson Girl arrangement, that high, full pompadour sitting above a smooth wave, requires the rat. The rat is a small padded roll of her own combings, saved hair by hair into the ceramic tidy on the dressing table over weeks, compressed into a cylinder, pinned in place beneath the lifted hair as a structural foundation. It is, in essence, a scaffold made of her past hair supporting the illusion of her present hair. She doesn't think about what it's made of. You built it. You know exactly what it's made of. Harrods sells hairpiece sets from 7 and 6 to £2. Emile Long on New Bond Street runs courses for ladies' maids at 1 to 3 guineas a series, which is how you know what you know, or part of it. The rest you learned from watching a woman named Bertine, a French-trained maid at the Shropshire house where you worked at 21, who pinned with both hands simultaneously and never once dropped a pin. Bertine did not explain what she was doing. You watched until you understood. That is, more or less, how this profession transmits itself. The pins go in, the hair is set. She looks, tilts her chin by 3 degrees, looks again. You wait. This is also part of the job, the waiting while she decides if what you've done is what she wanted, given that what she wanted was never specified. She nods. You gather the used towels. The morning, so far, has held. After the corset, the layers go on in a fixed sequence. Drawers or combinations first, then the corset cover, then one cambric petticoat, then a flannel one if the weather wants it, then the skirt, then the bodice. The sequence cannot be wrong. A petticoat put on after the skirt is a problem that can only be solved by undoing the skirt, which means undoing the bodice, which means redoing both. You learned this in your first week. You have not made the mistake since your first week. The layers go on quickly now, without anyone counting them. The bodice is last, because the bodice is the argument. Tiny hooks and eyes, 14 to 20 of them depending on the gown, each one requiring you to hold the fabric taut with one hand and guide the hook with the other. Your fingers know the spacing. They don't need to look anymore. A housemaid watching from the doorway once asked how long it took to learn. You said, a season. You meant, until your hand stopped apologizing. Let's talk about the skirt. It is not one piece. The morning skirt is wool or serge, cut with a slight train that clears the floor by half an inch, close enough to be elegant, high enough that it doesn't drag carpet fluff into the drawing room and cause a discussion. The morning skirt is heavy, biddable, and reliably unromantic. The afternoon tea gown is silk, softer at the waist, held with a different set of hooks entirely. The dinner gown opens at the back and requires 2 hands working simultaneously, which is not a design oversight. It is a design statement. You are the second pair of hands the design requires. Of course, this is only the morning change. A full society day runs 4 to 6 changes total, each one timed to the household calendar. Morning dress for receiving. A walking dress if there's a park visit, which there usually is because fresh air was fashionable in the way that suffering was fashionable, quietly, expensively, with good posture, an afternoon tea gown for exactly what it sounds like. A dinner gown, a ball gown, if the evening calls for it, which in the season it usually does, you are present for every change. You are the one constant in a wardrobe that costs more annually than your wage times 40, Mrs. Alderton, the head housemaid on the floor below, once told you that you had the best job in the house. You smiled. Mrs. Alderton goes to bed at 10 and wakes at 5:30 and does not stand at the edge of a ballroom at midnight holding a beaded reticule and a vial of sal volatile waiting for someone to need either. The ballroom floor is cold marble. Your shoes have thin soles. The reticule has opinions about how long it should be carried. The wardrobe itself is fitted pale wood, floor to ceiling, watchful, fragrant, and quietly possessive of every gown inside it, with lavender bags packed between the folded layers. Each shelf has a position, and each position is recorded in your written inventory, a small leather-bound notebook in your apron pocket that tracks which gown was worn to which event, because an aristocratic woman does not wear the same dinner gown to the same house twice in a season. And remembering which house saw which gown is not her problem. It is yours. The notebook has its own system, developed by you, understood only by you. You correspond with the couturiers directly. A note to Lucile at 17 Hanover Square about a repair to the ivory silk. A query to Worth's London representative on Grosvenor Street about the delivery date for the new evening bodice. These letters go out on house stationery, signed in your mistress's name, composed by you. The couture's girl seals her reply, addresses it to Lady C, and hands it to the footman at the front door, who hands it to the social secretary, who hands it to you. You slit it open with a small brass knife and read it before anyone else does. Nobody mentions this. Nobody has ever mentioned this. The bodice fastens with 32 hooks and 32 eyes, set close together along the back seam, each one smaller than a grain of rice. You work upward from the waist. You cannot see the hooks. You can only feel them. Your fingers do this faster than your eyes could, after 7 years of doing it. A hook missed in sequence means the bodice will sit a 1/4 inch off square, which means the whole silhouette will read wrong in the drawing room, which means it will be redone. You do not miss them. The hooks are small, sharp, and reliably indifferent to whether you have slept. Meanwhile, your own dress is plain navy serge, close-fitted, with your hair pinned back so severely it pulls slightly at the temples all day. This is not an accident. The bodice you're fastening this particular morning is pale grey silk from Lucile, 17 Hanover Square, altered twice since its original fitting because Lady C has lost weight in the shoulders and gained it elsewhere, as the body insists on doing regardless of what the season requires. The alteration was your correspondence. You wrote to Lucile's workroom in October. You described the new measurements in inches, specified which seam to let out, and enclosed a swatch of the original fabric in case the thread had faded. Lucile's girl wrote back within the week. The letter was addressed to your mistress. You opened it. The inventory sits in your apron pocket, a leather-bound notebook, narrow, well-thumbed, and uncomfortably comprehensive. You manage it, every gown logged by event attended, date worn, and current condition. The Doucet tea gown, Paris, 2 seasons ago, minor stain on the left cuff now disguised by a brooch you sourced yourself. The Worth evening gown in ivory, worn to 7 dinners, 1 ball, and a weekend at Chatsworth, where something happened to the hem that neither of you has officially acknowledged. The inventory runs to 43 entries. You know which gown went to which house. You know which dress was worn the night she argued with her husband in the anteroom and came back in looking very carefully neutral. 43 entries. You know everything. Meanwhile, the gown itself is being handed down the chain. A Worth evening dress at £40 is a significant object, heavy, hand-stitched, and quietly costly, and after 2 seasons it passes to you as a perquisite. You accept it with a correct, brief acknowledgement, and then, on your half-day, you take it to Petticoat Lane, where a woman named Mrs. Feinberg knows your face and gives you a fair price without a lot of unnecessary conversation. Last spring it was a bronze silk skirt from Swan and Edgar's own dressmaker. The spring before, a cape with jet beading. You have never once worn any of it. The money is more useful than the theatre. A maid named Agnes, who worked 3 houses down, once wore her mistress's cast-off blue taffeta to a Sunday afternoon concert in Kensington. Someone from the household saw her, Agnes had excellent fingers. Agnes had 7 years of hooks and eyes, and an iron hand with curling tongs. Agnes was let go without a character, and without a character you are professionally dead. Not metaphorically, but in the specific practical sense that no registry office in London will place you, and the character is entirely unregulated, meaning one woman's handwriting on one sheet of notepaper is the whole of your professional record. Agnes found work as a seamstress in Bermondsey. You think about Agnes sometimes when you fold the taffeta. You finish the last hook. You step back. You check the line at the shoulder, the line at the waist, the lie of the skirt where it meets the bodice. The seam is true. The silhouette reads correctly. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. Every night, you comb her hair out for one full count of 100 strokes, and every hair that comes away in the brush goes into a small ceramic bowl on the dressing table called the hair tidy. The hair tidy is never emptied into the fire. It is emptied into a paper twist, and the paper twist goes into a drawer, and the drawer is opened, in time, when there is enough hair to make use of. You have been collecting her hair, hair by hair, since the 2nd week of October. The goal is a rat, not a rodent. A rat is a padded roll of saved combings, shaped and pinned inside the dressed hair to give it the height and volume the Gibson Girl silhouette requires. The pompadour doesn't stand on its own. It stands on a carefully constructed interior scaffold of its former self, which is either poetic or slightly disturbing, and you don't have time to decide which. Harrods sells hairpiece sets for 7 shillings and 6pence up to £2, and you could purchase one and be done with it. But a bought rat is a different texture, a different colour, and a different weight than her actual hair. It sits wrong. It shows, if you know what to look for, and certain women at certain dinner tables absolutely know what to look for. So you collect. You wait. You accumulate. Let's talk about the curling tongs. They're heated over a spirit lamp, a small brass dish of methylated spirits burning at a low, faintly acrid flame, the smell of it mixing with the violet powder and rose water already in the room. There is no thermostat on a spirit lamp. There is no setting. There is only your judgment, your timing, and the 1-second test where you hold the tongs near the inside of your wrist to feel the heat radiating off the metal. Too cool and the curl falls out before she reaches the landing. Too hot and you have a problem that cannot be undone between now and her morning call, Mrs. Edith Fowler, lady's maid at Longleat for 11 years, kept a small square of brown paper tucked behind the lamp for testing temperature. She pressed the tongs to the paper first. A pale yellow mark meant correct. A brown mark meant wait. A black mark meant she'd already been waiting too long for something else and wasn't paying attention. She had a system for everything. The systems were not in any manual. They were hers. The finished hair is pinned with a method that takes years to feel natural and approximately 4 minutes to execute when you've done it enough times. The rat goes in first, positioned at the crown. Then the front hair is swept up and back over it, the pompadour raised, pinned from beneath so the pins don't show. Then the back coils, secured with long tortoiseshell pins that cost more than your daily wage and are entirely your responsibility not to lose. The whole structure, when it's right, looks like something that happened naturally. It did not happen naturally. You made it happen at 7:15 in the morning over a spirit lamp while she held very still and looked at her reflection and occasionally offered suggestions. Emile Long on New Bond Street ran hairdressing courses for ladies' maids at 1 to 3 guineas per series, which was real money for a real skill. You paid for the training. She wears the result. The arrangement is uncontroversial, established, and quietly absurd, and no one considers it unusual. The ceramic hair tidy sits on the dressing table between the silver-backed brush and the small jar of Castile pomade. It has a painted lid, a sprig of something blue, possibly forget-me-not, possibly just an optimistic gesture by whoever designed it. By February, the drawer will hold enough for a rat of reasonable size. You know this because you've done it before, for a different woman, in a different house, with a different ceramic tidy painted with a different flower. The mechanics don't change. Only the hair does. This morning the drawer has enough. You take the paper twist of saved combings to the small work table where you have a rectangle of fine net waiting. You shape the hair into a roll about the length of your hand, bound at both ends with brown thread that matches her colour exactly. This is the rat. It will sit hidden beneath the front pompadour of her hairstyle and give it the height the silhouette requires. You have built 4 rats from her own hair this year. None of them will ever be acknowledged out loud. Harrods sells hairpiece sets for between 7 and 6 and £2 in their 1906 catalogue, which your mistress has browsed and set aside because her hair will do just fine, assembled quietly by you in a back room from the ceramic tidy on her dressing table. The tidy itself is ivory-coloured with a small painted violet on the lid. It has a slot cut into the top where she pushes each day's combings without looking. You retrieve them without looking. Nobody looks. The rat goes in beneath the front wave first. You anchor it with the long pins, the 7-inch ones, not the short French pins that are useless for anything structural, and then you begin dressing the front hair up and over it. The pompadour requires the hair to appear to rise naturally from her forehead in one continuous confident sweep. It does not rise naturally. It rises because of the rat and 17 pins, and your thumbs placed at specific angles that you have refined across 2 years of her particular hair texture, which is fine, which loses curl by 11 in the morning if the spirit lamp ran hot, which has 3 cowlicks near the crown that she doesn't know about and you have never mentioned. The silhouette the Gibson Girl demands is, structurally, engineering. The hair must be wide at the top and taper toward the neck, so the head reads large and the hat can sit forward at that specific tilted angle that was in every illustrated magazine from 1901 onward. You have studied those illustrations, so has she. The difference is that she looks at the pictures and you look at the back of her head. The pins are sharp, slender, and reliably expensive. Each tortoiseshell pin is your responsibility, bought on your wages, replaced on your wages, counted before she sits and counted when she stands to leave. A lost pin can mean a loosened section at the back, which means you are summoned, which means you cross whatever room you have been dismissed to and repair the thing quietly, in a doorway, while she continues a conversation about the Aberdeenshire shooting, with someone whose name she will mention and you will remember. You have a better memory for names at this point than she does. You do not use this information. Meanwhile, the rat itself sits perfectly still inside the construction, doing its work, anonymous as a nail inside a wall. It is, when you think about it, which you don't, particularly, there isn't time, a piece of her, holding up the version of herself she shows in public. That is a coincidence of material. It is not something you would say out loud. Margaret Soames, the maid to Lady Alderton at Longleat's Southern Annex, keeps a small notebook where she records each dressing, the pins used, the products applied, the time taken. 14 minutes for an ordinary morning, 22 for an evening with a tiara. She writes this in pencil, in a hand so small it reads like a telegram. She closes the notebook and sets it in the left pocket of her dress before she leaves the dressing room. The notebook is not for anyone else. It is how she knows she is good at this. Your own measure is different. It is private, wordless, and quietly conclusive. She has never asked you to redo a hairstyle once it's pinned. Not once. You know this because you would remember. The hair goes up. The rat sits flat against the scalp, pinned with 8 U-pins of polished steel, and her own hair is brought up and over it in a smooth curve that has to look as if it has arrived there on its own. The front is puffed outward at the temples. The back is twisted and pinned into a soft figure 8. You hold the curling tongs against a section, count to 4, release, and the wave settles in. The hairstyle takes between 30 and 40 minutes. She holds the hand mirror at a steady angle. The tongs are heated over a spirit lamp. The lamp smells of methylated spirits with a faint alcoholic sharpness that sits underneath the rose water and the violet powder and the warm wool of the dressing room like an uninvited fourth thing. You test the temperature against a piece of brown paper before you go near her head. Brown paper scorches pale gold at the right heat. It scorches dark brown too fast. You've memorized both colours. The line between them is about 1 second wide, and on the other side of it is her hair, which cannot be replaced this morning and possibly not this week. Overheated tongs leave a crease, not a wave, a crease with a faint smell, and she will see it in the mirror before you can say anything useful. You stand there and wait for the expression in the glass. Emile Long on New Bond Street offers hairdressing courses for ladies' maids at 1 to 3 guineas per series, waving, plaiting, hairpiece construction, the Gibson pompadour. Whoever trained you passed the method down the way people pass down anything important. Once, quickly, while doing something else. You caught it. It lives in your hands now. The rat itself, seen from the outside, is modest, oval, and quietly disreputable. It's a compressed roll of saved hair, roughly the size of a tangerine that has given up, covered in fine net, anchored to the scalp at 4 points. From the front, it's completely invisible. From the top, it gives the pompadour its height and its smooth dome. Without it, the style collapses into something flat and apologetic. The Gibson Girl silhouette is, structurally speaking, approximately 30% architecture and 70% the rat. Nobody says this at dinners. You know this in your fingers. Harrods' 1906 catalogue sells hairpiece sets at 7 shillings 6pence to £2 depending on weight and colour match. The colour match is where the catalogue cannot help you. Your mistress's hair is a specific shade that shifts in winter light towards something almost ashen, and in afternoon sun picks up a warm auburn note that the catalogue does not have a name for. You know the shade because you have been looking at it from 8 inches away for the better part of 3 years. A purchased rat in the wrong colour is immediately visible to any woman in the room and to no man. This means it is visible to everyone. A housemaid named Dorothea, assigned briefly to dressing room duties during a staff illness at a Wiltshire estate, once applied the tongs too long on a front section. The curl didn't crease. It simply ceased to have the quality of being hair and acquired instead the quality of being something that used to be hair. Dorothea was reassigned to the linen room by luncheon. The linen room didn't have a spirit lamp. She considered this an improvement. After the tongs comes the pinning. The average full Gibson dressing uses between 22 and 30 pins before it's stable. You count going in. You count coming down at night. A pin left in overnight works its way forward by morning and announces itself with a precision that hair itself can't manage. She tilts her chin slightly to check the profile. The pompadour catches the morning light and holds it. The wave at the temples is correct. The back is smooth. The rat is invisible. The whole construction is airy, effortless, and quietly engineered in the way that 35 minutes of concentrated technical work occasionally manages to appear. She sets the hand mirror down. You note the time in your head. 38 minutes. There are between 30 and 60 servants in this house, depending on the season, and 12 of them are women. The hierarchy is fixed, and you know your place inside it the way you know which step on the back staircase creaks. Above you is the housekeeper. Below you are the head housemaid, the under housemaids, the still-room maid, the laundry maids, and the scullery maid. The cook is technically equal to you, but operates in a separate kingdom downstairs. You sit second in the women's hall. The chair has a small brass plate with a number on it. The brass plate is not decorative. Sitting in the wrong chair at the servants' hall table is not a mistake anyone makes twice. Missus. Purvis, the housekeeper, sits first. You sit second. Everyone below you files in order, and the scullery maid, whose name is Agnes, sits so far down the table that the bread basket rarely reaches her in good condition. You arrive before Agnes. Agnes will leave before you. This is not discussed. Edith, the head housemaid, sits 2 seats below you and serves herself the soup with a particular tilt of the ladle that returns approximately 1/3 of what she takes back to the tureen, which is the visible portion of an invisible policy. The policy is that the lady's maid eats first, the head housemaid eats second, and the gap between those positions is measured, deliberate, and quietly compensated in spoon volume. Edith does not look up while she does this. Edith has never once looked up. What sets you apart from the 11 other women in this house is one privilege, ordinary, portable, and slightly enviable. You travel. The head housemaid stays. The under housemaids stay. The laundry maids absolutely stay. They belong to the copper tubs and the mangling room the way the tubs belong to the floor. You follow your mistress to London, to Scotland, to Monte Carlo, and possibly to Biarritz if her nerves require it. You have been to France. You have stood in a Paris hotel corridor holding a hat box while the concierge sorted out a misunderstanding about the suite. The head housemaid has been to Shrewsbury. This is the entire difference between your positions, and it shows. Your wages reflect the gap. An under housemaid earns £14 to £18 a year. A kitchen maid earns 12 to 16. You earn 25 to 45, and if you have any claim to French training, or if you wrote some French on your registry form with the confidence of a woman who once ate a croissant, the number climbs. A genuinely French-trained maid commands £60 to £80 by 1910, which is why a certain percentage of English maids in 1903 have mysteriously acquired French names, and a slight pause before answering direct questions in that language. The Lady magazine lists it plainly. French ladies' maid preferred, with knowledge of millinery. You noted the preferred. You are working on the millinery, Mrs. Purvis keeps the household accounts, holds the linen keys, and manages the daily schedule of every woman in service here. She does not manage you. You answer to your mistress alone, which Mrs. Purvis finds professionally irritating in the way of a complaint she can't officially file. You are not hostile. You are simply on a separate chain of command, and that chain runs directly upstairs. Mrs. Purvis can reassign Agnes. She cannot reassign you. She can send Dorothea to the linen room after a scorched front section. She has no comparable lever over you, and she knows it, and there is a particular quality of silence between you at the dinner table that has lasted 4 years. Below Mrs. Purvis and below you, the rank order functions like a small, unglamorous civil service. Edith, the head housemaid, moves through the main rooms with a cloth and a proprietary air, touching surfaces you will never be asked to touch. Her domain is the visible house. Yours is the visible person inside it. These are different jurisdictions, and collisions are rare, mostly because the back stairs are wide enough for one, and precedence governs who flattens herself against the wall. The cold in your room follows no social hierarchy. It is equally distributed to every woman above the ground floor, regardless of brass plate number. Your room is slightly larger than the under-housemaid's shared room, which means it is cold in a different geometry. There is a small iron grate. You have learned to keep your good wool shawl, your mistress's old one, the dove-grey one that came with the November cast-offs, folded at the foot of the bed where it is useful at 3 in the morning rather than decorative at noon. The grate itself is small, sooty, and reliably unimpressed by anything you ask of it. The under-housemaids have the same shawl in coarser wool. This is the hierarchy rendered in textiles. The housekeeper outranks you on paper. In practice, you answer only to your mistress, and the housekeeper knows this, and you know that she knows. She cannot assign you tasks. She cannot dock your wages. She cannot dismiss you. What she can do is make your life unpleasant in the small, accumulating ways available to a person who controls the linen cupboard, the keys to the still room, and the seating chart of the servants' hall. You and the housekeeper have been polite to each other for 7 years. Both of you are very good at it. The footman next to you at dinner has been with the family for 4 years. He defers. The housemaids defer. The kitchen maid, who is 17 and terrified of everything, defers so completely she sometimes forgets to breathe near you. You don't ask for this. It just accumulates, the way cold accumulates in a corridor that no one bothers to heat. The deference is patient, cumulative, and entirely unrequested. You set it down in the corner of the room every evening. It is there again every morning. Answering only to your mistress means, in practical terms, that your workday begins and ends at her convenience. It means when she decides, at 11 in the evening, that she needs the blue silk repressed for tomorrow because she's changed her mind about Thursday's dinner, you press it. There's no appeal process. There's no one to tell her the blue silk was already perfect. You know this because you pressed it 4 hours ago. A housemaid, Dora, wide-set eyes, the kind of deliberate quietness that is doing a lot of work, passes your door with the coal scuttle each morning at 6:15. She looks at you with a particular expression that is not quite pity and not quite admiration. You've never named the expression. You just know it well enough to recognize it in the dark. You know the names of your mistress's dressmakers, her creditors, the specific letter she burned in September without explanation. You know how long it actually takes her to dress versus how long she tells her husband it takes. You know which migraine is real and which one is tactical. A lady's maid who talks lasts 1 season. A lady's maid who doesn't can last a decade and gather enough in cast-offs and perquisites to retire comfortably, if retire is the word for opening a small dressmaking shop in Kensington at 40. Mrs. Alcott keeps a piece of folded notepaper in the secretaire downstairs with your name on it. She has written nothing on it yet. She does not need to. The paper sits in the second drawer on the right, and on the day she decides to write something on it, the paper becomes your professional existence. Single sheet, single author, single draft, and unappealable. You don't offer unrequested opinions. You don't arrive with visible feelings. You arrive at 6:30 with heated tongs, perfect posture, and a face trained to do very little. And the tension with the housekeeper, Mrs. Purvis, it has a shape. The shape is precise, deliberate, and quietly geometric, with the unhurried courtesy of trench warfare. She controls the linen. You control the dressing room. She has authority over 8 members of staff. You have the ear of the one person who can dismiss her. Neither of you says this, Missus. Purvis updates the servants' hall seating chart in pencil on the last Sunday of each month, and your name stays exactly where it has stayed for 7 years, written firmly in the second slot in a hand that has considered, every month, the possibility of writing it somewhere else. She closes the linen cupboard with the flat of her palm rather than the latch, which makes a particular soft thud you can hear from 2 corridors away, and which means, depending on the hour, either that the morning has been satisfactory or that someone has misfolded a sheet. The dining room gets dusted, the hall gets swept, dinner is announced at 8. The whole house runs on what isn't said. A character is a piece of paper, written by an employer, that describes who you are. It is not regulated by any outside body. It cannot be appealed. A previous mistress can write what she likes about your conduct, your temper, your honesty, your hair, and the next employer will read it in private and decide. Without a character, you cannot be placed by any registry office in London. A maid dismissed without one has stopped being a lady's maid. Your character, at this house, is presently very good. You think about it often. Very good means punctual, discreet, and reliably uninterested in offering opinions. You have not, in 3 years, offered an unrequested opinion about anything your mistress does. Not about the laudanum she takes at 11. Not about the letters she burns on Tuesday mornings. Not about the dress she wore to the Harrington dinner, which you know for a fact she also wore to the Pembridge dinner 14 months prior, because you maintain the written inventory, and the inventory does not forget. The inventory is, in its way, more honest than either of you. The character system is Glassdoor with 1 reviewer, no appeals panel, no ombudsman, and the reviewer holds your entire professional future in her pocket. There is no representative standing in the hallway waiting to hear your side. There has never been. Mrs. Fellows, the housekeeper, keeps her own ledger of the household maid's conduct. You are not in it. Your conduct does not belong to her. This is the arrangement that sustains the cold peace between you. She manages the back stairs, you manage the dressing room. The line between those 2 territories is invisible and absolutely fixed. Dora, the housemaid who brings your morning hot water up from the kitchen, moves carefully across it. She sets the pitcher down with the handle turned toward you. She has learned which way you prefer the handle. She does not comment on this. Smart girl. You dress and undress a woman who knows things about you too. She knows your half-day preferences, your occasional headache, the name of the registry office where you were placed 3 years ago. The intimacy runs in both directions. It just doesn't run equally. She holds the pen and the inkwell and the secretaire key. You hold the curling tongs. The tongs are warm, brass, and reliably unhelpful in any argument. A maid dismissed on the spot, no notice, no character, conduct unbecoming, has 1 or 2 paths remaining. Dressmaking, if her hands are good enough and her clientele adequate. Lady's companion, which pays less and asks more. The registry offices on Marylebone High Street will not touch a maid without written character. A new mistress will not receive you without it. You know 2 women from your last household who ended in exactly this position. One sews alterations on Berwick Street. The other is not discussed. So the paper you currently hold, the verbal one, unwritten, maintained by your continuing to be very good, is worth more than your wages. It is worth more than the cast-off Lucile you resold last spring. It is the whole architecture of the next 10 years of your life, expressed in someone else's handwriting, and it does not yet exist. You earn it daily. You have not stopped earning it once. You came into this house through Mrs. Hunt's agency in Marylebone Road, which keeps a ledger of every lady's maid in service in London, and has a window where applicants wait on a hard bench against the wall. The ledger lists name, age, previous employer, character, and any specialist skills: French, hairdressing, millinery, dressmaking, light medical. The bench is hard and the wait is long, and the lady behind the desk does not smile at anyone. You are still in her ledger. The entry is updated every 2 years whether you are seeking a position or not. The agency charges the employer 1 guinea per successful placement. You paid nothing. This was framed as a benefit to you. The guinea came out of the household account and nobody mentioned it again, which is how most financial arrangements in this world resolve themselves, quietly, from a direction you weren't watching. The other women on that bench have stories of their own. A woman named Catherine, to your left, has written conversational French on her form. She grew up in Ipswich. Her French is approximately 3 words of hairdressing vocabulary and a confident demeanour. A French-trained maid earns up to £80 a year, and the gap between genuine fluency and performed fluency is roughly £35, and the ability to say chatelaine without hesitating. Catherine got the position. You did not ask which position. The registry form has 12 lines. You filled in 10. The 2 blank ones are foreign languages spoken fluently and millinery training. You've left them blank because you were raised by a schoolteacher who considered honesty a structural feature of the blank. Self. This will cost you approximately 1 employer tier for the duration of your career. The blank lines sit in Mrs. Hunt's ledger like a small, persistent critique. Mrs. Hunt herself appears twice a day, once at 11 and once at 3. She wears the same grey coat both times. A girl on the bench the first time you came told you Mrs. Hunt had placed maids in 7 of the great houses, including one placement at Chatsworth that she mentions to employers as casually as other people mention the weather. Mrs. Hunt hands the desk clerk a folded note. The clerk updates 3 ledger entries, and Mrs. Hunt leaves. She does not look at the bench. The bench is not her concern. The bench is patient, professional, and reliably full. You occupy the 3rd seat from the door. There is a small splinter in the underside of the armrest where someone before you wore a hole into the varnish. The bench is hard, narrow, and quietly accumulative about who has sat on it. The agency also runs a correspondence service for employers on the continent. Lady Ashworth's household in Biarritz sent a telegram in February requesting a replacement maid with light medical experience and a settled disposition, which is the polite formulation for someone who won't react, visibly to what they find in the medicine chest. Mrs. Hunt's clerk wrote back the same day, 3 names from the ledger. One of them was yours, though you didn't know it at the time. You didn't get that placement either, for reasons that were never explained, which is also how most things in this world resolve. The ledger isn't the worst part. The worst part is that it's accurate. Every position, every departure date, every character notation, very good, satisfactory, left on mutual terms, which is the notation that means something happened that nobody is going to specify, all of it recorded in the clerk's neat hand and available to any employer who walks through the door with a guinea and a vacancy. You have no access to your own entry. You could ask, but asking is not encouraged. The ledger has a policy about this. The policy is silence, administered pleasantly. Still, you are in the ledger. You are employed. The bench is behind you now, and the house in front of you is very large, and the work begins at 6:30, and Mrs. Hunt's clerk has already noted your start date in a column you'll never read. The ledger column for French is the column that matters. A maid who speaks French, or has trained in Paris, or can plausibly pass for either, earns nearly twice what an English-trained maid earns. You've written some French in that column for 7 years, on the unspoken understanding shared by Mrs. Hunt and yourself that some French can mean many things. You know 38 words. 22 of them are the names of fabrics. You have never, in any house, been asked to demonstrate fluency, because nobody who hired you wanted to find out. The Lady Magazine, 1903 issue, page 11, specifies French lady's maid preferred, with knowledge of millinery. The ad runs for 6 consecutive weeks. You have read it 4 times. The woman who gets that position is named Sylvie, and Sylvie is from Calais, and Sylvie earns £65 a year, and Sylvie is not you. What Sylvie actually does with her French is mostly tell the couturier's assistant which hooks are pulling. The couturier's assistant speaks English. They both know this. The French is theatre, and Sylvie is a very committed performer. An English-trained maid in 1905 earns between £25 and £45 annually. A French-trained maid earns up to 80. The housemaid sleeping 2 floors above you on the back stairs earns 14. The kitchen maid earns 12. You earn 32. Respectable, and a permanent reminder that 38 words is not £65. The gap has a name. The name is Paris. You have never been. Emile Long on New Bond Street runs hairdressing courses for ladies' maids at 1 to 3 guineas per series. The course covers Marcel waving, the Gibson Girl pompadour, pinning technique, and the correct angle for heated tongs. 3 guineas is a month's wages. You went once on a Thursday and stood outside the door for several minutes before deciding that the money would not, in fact, teach you an accent. You walked to a tea room instead. The scone was 2 pence and did not require any French at all. Mrs. Alcott, your current mistress, does not speak French either. She spent 3 seasons in Biarritz and came back able to order coffee and describe the sea. Her French is 17 words, 3 of which are the same word spelled differently in her memory. She does not know you know this. This is the informational economy of the dressing room. You know the number of her French words, the tension of her corset lacing on bad mornings, and which letters from Paris she reads standing up. She knows you have some French. You are even. Sylvie, at her current house, says approximately 4 French words per day in front of guests, all of them rehearsed. She says Lucile when she fetches a shawl. She says voilà when she sets a hairbrush down. The Worth gown requires a French maid the way a Vuitton trunk requires a Vuitton label, flat, brown, leather, and entirely visible. The trunk would hold the same gowns without it. Nobody mentions this in the dressing room either. Marguerite, a maid 3 doors down in Grosvenor Square, French by birth, punctilious and meticulous about reminding people, adjusts a hairpin with the deliberate slowness of someone who has been paid to be deliberate. She does this in view of the other maids. She does it without looking up. The hairpin goes in at precisely the angle Emile Long recommended, and when it lands, the hair doesn't move for the rest of the evening. You watch this. You file it away. You practice the angle in your room on a Tuesday with a comb and a pillow. The pillow is not impressed, but the angle improves. You write, "Some French again next year." The column accepts it without comment. The column has always been very understanding. Your wage at this house is £38 a year, paid quarterly, the second highest woman's wage in the building. It is a respectable sum. It is not, however, the part of your compensation that matters. The part that matters is the long-established custom that your mistress's cast-off clothing comes to you. A walking suit, 2 evening gowns, a tea gown, 3 pairs of gloves, and an opera cloak have already come down this year. You wear some of them. You sell some of them. You keep records of both in a small notebook. The notebook is small, leather, and reliably uncooperative about closing. It has 2 columns. The left column is labelled kept. The right column is labelled sold. There is no third column for sold and claim to have kept, but in practice that column is the fullest. The notebook is small enough to fit in a pocket and old enough that the cover no longer closes flat. It has opinions about staying shut. The gown currently sitting in the trunk at the foot of your bed is a Worth evening dress, ivory silk with jet bead trim, which your mistress wore twice, once to a ball at Londonderry House and once to supper at the Savoy, 2 outings, 2 seasons ago. The dress cost £40 when it was ordered from the Grosvenor Street house and arrived wrapped in tissue that smelled like Paris and self-importance. It comes to you now slightly altered at the waist because your mistress had missus. Potts let it out half an inch after Christmas. You will take it to Petticoat Lane on your next half-day off. You already know what it will fetch. The market there has a system. A woman named Dolores takes continental house gowns on a Tuesday, sets a price by Thursday, and hands over the money minus her commission on Saturday. She handles the ivory Worth without comment, turns it once, checks the jet beading on the left sleeve, and names a figure. The figure is not £40. The figure is not close to £40, but it is more than 2 weeks of your wages, paid in actual cash, with no quarterly waiting. Of course, not everything comes down in wearable condition. The opera cloak arrived with a pulled seam at the right shoulder, which you repaired the same evening it was handed to you, using silk thread from the dressing room mending box that technically belongs to the household. The gloves are a different category. Kid gloves from Dent's at 3 to 5 shillings a pair are useless to you if your hands run larger than your mistress's, which yours do, slightly, on the right side. You have sold 4 pairs this year. You have given 2 pairs to your mother, who has smaller hands and no opinion about provenance. The housemaids earn £14 to £18 a year. The kitchen maids earn 12 to 16. They receive no cast-offs, because they have no access to the rooms where cast-offs originate. The distance between your wage and theirs looks like £8 or £10 on paper. It is not £8 or £10. Between the resale income and the wearable pieces, the real gap is considerably wider and entirely invisible to any official accounting. The notebook is the only ledger that knows the true number. The notebook keeps its own counsel. There is a tea gown, bottle green silk, trimmed in cream lace, which you haven't decided about yet. You've worn it once on your half-day to visit a friend in Kensington, and 3 people asked where you'd had it made. You said a dressmaker in Pimlico. You didn't elaborate. The lace at the cuff is a little loose, but the colour is precisely the kind of colour that makes people stop mid-sentence. You've moved it from the sell side of the notebook to the kept side twice now. It keeps migrating back. The dress is conducting its own negotiations and has not yet arrived at a final position. On your half day, twice a month, you take a brown paper parcel down to Petticoat Lane in the East End, where there is a woman behind a wooden counter named Mistress. Levy, who knows the difference between a Worth bodice and a copy of one, and pays accordingly. A 2-season-old Lucile gown in good condition fetches you between £3 and £6. You hand the parcel across. She lifts the gown to the light. She names a price. You settle in the middle. The whole transaction takes 4 minutes. You do not stay to talk. Mrs. Levy has been doing this since before you arrived in London. She can read a seam allowance the way a solicitor reads a contract, quick, exact, and reliably unsentimental about what she finds. The silk charmeuse from last spring's Ascot gown is slightly faded along one shoulder where it sat in the sun beside the paddock rail for 40 minutes. She notes this. The price reflects it. You have stopped being surprised by how much she notices, because she notices everything. The dress has been places. She charges you accordingly for that. The parcel under your arm holds a single gown from Lucile at 17 Hanover Square. It originally cost somewhere between £35 and £50, depending on the embellishment. Your mistress wore it 3 times, once to a dinner in Mayfair, once to a garden party in Surrey that rained, once to a theatre supper she left early. It spent the rest of its first season wrapped in tissue in the pale wood wardrobe, smelling of lavender bags and regret. After the second season, it was yours. The whole transaction, from couturier to dressing room to brown paper parcel, is a consignment economy with a very long delay and one involuntary middleman. That middleman is you. The money goes into the right-hand column of the small notebook you keep in your room, the private one, not the wardrobe inventory. You don't record what sold, you record what arrived. The difference between those two facts is something Mrs. Levy understands completely and has never once raised aloud. Not every gown goes to Petticoat Lane. Some you keep. You are permitted to wear them on your half-days, which creates a situation where a lady's maid from a household earning £38 a year is occasionally seen on the Strand in a dress that cost more than most shop clerks earn in a year. A woman in a Lucile gown on the Strand is simply a woman in a Lucile gown. The gown does not announce its history. It has learned discretion from spending 2 seasons in your dressing room. There is a worn velvet jacket your mistress gave you in March, technically a perquisite, technically yours, that you have worn to 4 places and returned from 4 places and feel, despite all evidence, that it has started forming opinions about where it goes. The jacket is patient, observant, and quietly judgmental about Oxford Street. It approves of the National Gallery. It is neutral about the tea room. It has not yet delivered a verdict on the park. Mrs. Levy keeps her ledger in a soft black-bound book under the counter. She enters your gown in pencil, 4 words, and a price. Your name is not in the book. Neither is Lady C's. Mrs. Levy has been at this long enough to know which transactions take written names and which ones do not, and she has a particular look she gives the question if anyone is foolish enough to ask it. You fold the paper parcel under your arm on the way back up. It's lighter now. You walk through the late afternoon, past the flower sellers on Liverpool Street, past the paper boy who always shouts the same headline regardless of what the headline actually is that day. Your half-day ends at 6. You'll be back before the evening change. At 2:45, you are required upstairs to change her for callers. Callers arrive between 3 and 5 in the established London visiting hour, and the dress they see her in must be different from the dress she wore at breakfast, at lunch, on the morning drive, or in the conservatory at noon. You unfasten 32 hooks. You unlace the morning corset. You lace the afternoon corset, which is a different shape, because afternoon receiving requires a slightly looser ribcage. Then you begin again from the drawers. This is the 3rd change of the day. It won't be the last. A full society Tuesday runs morning dress, walking dress, afternoon tea gown, dinner gown, and then the ball gown. If there's a ball, which there often is because it's May and May in London is basically a Beyoncé tour schedule, except the headliner is wearing whalebone and her ribcage has opinions about it. The hooks are very small. They are tiny, sharp, and reliably uncooperative, holding the bodice closed from the waist to the collarbone in a column of approximately 30 to 40 depending on the gown, and your fingers have done this enough times that you no longer look at them directly. You work by feel, the way a pianist plays scales. The hooks find the eyes on their own. Your thumbs know the resistance of a correctly seated clasp versus one that's slightly off axis and will pop open mid-call. You correct it before she stands. Meanwhile, the afternoon gown itself has been aired since morning. You removed it from the fitted palewood wardrobe at 11, shook it gently, checked the hem for any damage from the last wearing, and hung it near the window in indirect light, because direct light yellows the silk. A card in your inventory notebook records that this gown was last worn to Lady Forbes Watson's at home on the 14th, and before that to the Duchess of Devonshire's garden party, and that the lace at the left sleeve pulled slightly and was repaired with a needle and thread you keep in a small tin in your apron pocket at all times. The tin goes everywhere with you. It is the size of a sardine can. It contains your entire professional competence. Margaret, the under-housemaid, sometimes passes the dressing room door at this hour carrying fresh water. She moves at a pace that suggests she'd like to stop and watch. She never does. You close the door with one foot while managing the bodice with both hands, which is a skill nobody taught you and nobody will ever acknowledge. The hair doesn't need redoing for callers, only tidying, a few loose pins repositioned, the pompadour patted back into shape over the rat, which has shifted slightly toward the left side during lunch. The rat holds a good shape when it's been constructed correctly, which yours always has been, because an asymmetrical pompadour is a detail callers notice and comment on, and your mistress will feel in the quality of her afternoon. You press it back. 2 pins. Done. By 3 o'clock she is downstairs in the drawing room, and you are back on the back stairs with 32 small hooks worth of morning bodice draped over your arm, heading for the wardrobe room to check the dinner gown. Dinner is at 8. That gives you 5 hours, which sounds generous, until you account for the fact that the gown requires pressing, the gloves need turning right side out and checking at each finger seam, the silk stockings from Swan and Edgar need inspecting for any new snags at 4 to 6 shillings a pair, and you haven't eaten since 7 this morning. The dinner change will take 45 minutes. After that comes the evening wrap, the fan, the reticule, the jewel case, which she manages herself in theory and requires your assistance in practice. Then you wait up. She returns between 11 and 2, depending on where she's been and how the evening went, which you will know before she tells you because her posture in the doorway communicates everything, and you've been reading that doorway for 3 years. The corset comes off. The pins come out. The day ends. You have been on your feet since 6:30 this morning. That's the afternoon change. Across a single day, she will change clothes between 4 and 6 times. Morning dress for the breakfast room, walking dress for the park, tea gown for callers, dinner gown for the dining room, ball gown for the evening, and one further change at some point that is never explained but always required. Each change is 30 minutes. Each change is unfastened and refastened by your hands. On a busy day, you have dressed and undressed her 12 times across 14 hours, which leaves 4 hours for everything else you're expected to do. The 4 hours are not continuous. They are sliced into portions and distributed across the day like very small sandwiches at a gathering where nobody is allowed to sit. You clean the brushes, you press the walking dress. You sponge the hem of the morning gown, which has encountered something in the breakfast room that you are choosing not to identify. You mend the left cuff of the tea gown, where the hook pulled slightly. You catalogue the dinner gown in the event register, date, venue, host, because she cannot wear the same gown to the same house twice, and your memory is the thing standing between her and that humiliation. The inventory is a slim exercise book with a marbled cover, kept in the 3rd drawer of the dressing table, narrow, well-thumbed, and quietly authoritative. It contains every garment in active rotation, gown, occasion, date, host, any alteration required before next wear. The Lucile dinner gown has been to Grosvenor Square twice. The amber Worth has been nowhere near Lady Pemberton's table, which means it's safe for Thursday, and yet the changes themselves are the whole architecture of your day. The morning dress is cotton lawn, easy enough. 18 hooks at the back, 3 at the cuff, done in 8 minutes if she stands still, which she doesn't. The walking dress has a standing collar that closes with a hook so small it exists primarily as a philosophical problem. The tea gown is deceptively forgiving, loose, sashed, a relative holiday, except that it must look entirely effortless, which means pressing the chiffon insert with a barely warm iron and holding your breath across the silk. A sharp hiss means you've ruined it. A slow, patient evaporation means you're still employed. The dinner gown is the longest. Missus. Hatch, the housekeeper at Longleat, Once told a new girl that a dinner gown had more structural integrity than most marriages, and she wasn't wrong. Boning in the bodice. Hooks down the left side. A separate underbodice that must be aligned before the outer bodice is fastened, or the whole thing lists slightly to port and doesn't come right until it's entirely removed and started again. The dinner gown is heavy, intricate, and quietly architectural. Your mistress has worn this one 4 times. You know exactly how it fastens. You know that the third hook from the hem binds slightly if you rush it. You don't rush it. Esther Fenn, a lady's maid whose name appeared in the 1902 registry correspondence and nowhere after, apparently rushed the third hook from the hem. Nobody knows what happened to Esther Fenn. The ball gown is the closing argument of the day. By this point it is 9 o'clock in the evening. You have been standing since 6:30 in the morning. Your lower back has developed a specific, intelligent ache that knows exactly where you've been weak since birth and has chosen to address it now. You lace the corset one final time, 22 inches, give or take a held breath. Smooth the skirts, pin the small spray of feathers at the shoulder, and step back. She turns to the glass. The reflection agrees with the effort. She doesn't say so. You stand outside the ballroom door with her wrap and her evening bag while the music starts inside. You won't go in. Your job tonight is to be present in the corridor, neither sitting nor entirely visible, available in the way that furniture is available, there when needed, unnoticed otherwise. A footman named George passes you twice with a tray. He nods the second time. You don't nod back because nodding back is a conversation, and a conversation is a commitment. And you have 4 more hours and 1 undressing left before this day finishes what it started. Her silk stockings are washed by you, in the small basin in your sewing room, in tepid water with a single shaving of Castile soap. The general laundry would shrink them. The general laundry has, in fact, shrunk them, once, in 1903, and that pair cost 4 and 6pence at Swan and Edgar on Regent Street, which is roughly half a week's wage for a kitchen maid. They have been washed only by you ever since. You wash 6 pairs a week. You hang them to dry on a wooden rack near, but never on the window. The soap is not really soap. It is, more accurately, a ritual boundary. A shaving of Castile soap dissolved in tepid water, then the stockings eased in, not wrung, never wrung, and moved gently between your palms the way you'd handle something that had already been disappointed once. Lux Flakes have been available since 1900, small and white and dissolving clean, and you keep both on the shelf with the same studious neutrality a pharmacist keeps competing remedies. The silk tells you which it prefers on a given morning. The silk is opinionated, mercurial, and quietly proud. You have learnt to listen. 6 shillings a pair from Swan and Edgar. That is 3 pairs for the price of a housemaid's entire weekly wage. You wash them by hand. You dry them level. You do not let them touch direct heat because heat sets the shape permanently, and the shape that sets is rarely the intended one. The wooden rack near the window earns its position through this logic. The kid gloves are a separate category entirely. Dents on Oxford Street, 3 to 5 shillings a pair, cream or white or the pale grey she prefers for morning calls, and they don't wash, not really. You clean them on the hand, stuffed with a rolled cloth to keep the shape, worked with a small damp sponge, and a mixture you make yourself from warm water and a very little white spirit. A lady's maid at Longleat told you once, during a country house visit in 1906, that she used breadcrumb for the pale ones. You tried it, it worked. You told nobody. The lace is the most demanding item on the shelf, and also the most fragile, and also the most likely to be handed to you with a small, significant pause. That means it has already been damaged, and you are being trusted to reverse time. Valenciennes, Honiton, Brussels, each one goes into its own muslin bag before the basin so it doesn't catch on itself. You press it between clean towels afterward. You never iron it directly. You iron around it through a damp cloth, coaxing the pattern back into itself with the tip of the iron the way you'd talk someone calm. Now, the iron test. You have done this 3,000 times and you still do it the same way. Lift the iron, tilt the face upward, spit lightly on the surface. Sharp hiss, too hot for silk. A slow, quiet spread. Correct. Missus, Hartley on the 3rd floor, who irons the linen, uses a damp finger. You find this imprecise. The iron has no particular feelings about this disagreement. It simply continues to require testing. The mending basket sits on the chair by your work table, and it has an expression, not hostile, not urgent, just persistent. A pulled thread in a stocking ladder means an hour with a fine needle and a magnifying lens borrowed from the butler's desk, because your mistress will not notice it worked loose and back, but she will notice, with a certainty bordering on supernatural, the first morning you let it pass. You catch the run at the third row. You always catch it at the third row. There is no fourth row. By the time you've washed, dried, pressed, mended, and returned everything to its correct drawer, silk stockings folded lengthwise, gloves finger by finger, lace wrapped in tissue, it is nearly 11, and you can hear the dressing bell from 2 floors above, which means she's decided on the walking dress after all and needs her hair pinned again before luncheon. The flat iron heats on the gas ring while you sort the things to be pressed. You test its temperature the way you were taught, which is by spitting lightly onto the metal surface and reading what happens. A sharp, instant hiss means the iron is too hot for silk. A slow sliding evaporation is correct for most fine fabrics. No reaction at all means cold and useless. The test is not in any household manual you have ever read. It was taught to you by the lady's maid before you, in this same room, in 1898. The woman who taught you was named Frances. She pressed a cambric petticoat while she explained it, not looking at you, making the demonstration look effortless in the way that all useful knowledge looks effortless once someone has been doing it for 8 years. She had opinions about cotton that bordered on theological. Frances is in Hampshire now, lady's companion to a widow, which is what a lady's maid becomes when her knees give out. The things waiting to be pressed are arranged by temperature requirement, because that's how you think now, in heat gradients. The muslin first, then the cotton petticoat linings, then the silk evening blouse, which requires a cloth between the iron and the fabric and your full attention and a willingness to hold your breath. The blouse has 23 pin tucks down the front, each one 1/3 of an inch wide, each one capable of ruining itself under a careless pass. 23. You counted them. They know you counted them. The blouse, in return, is patient, intricate, and quietly judgmental. The bodices come next. The hooks and eyes that run up the back of a fitted bodice are so small that a housemaid's fingers, calloused from scrubbing, can't close them efficiently without fumbling. Yours can, because you've been closing them since you were 19, and at this point your fingers operate with the competence of a small, highly motivated lock-picking mechanism. The bodice from last Tuesday's dinner is waiting. 2 of the hooks caught fabric when she sat down sharply in the carriage. You press the panel flat, work the distortion back, rehang it without comment. The bodice is silent, ungrateful, and reliably uncommunicative. It never thanks you. Your ankles, by this point, have an opinion. You've been on your feet since 6:30. It is now, depending on the morning's demands, somewhere between 10 and 11. The dressing took 40 minutes, a moderate day. The hairdressing took 25. The morning letters arrived and required her to change her blouse before callers, so that was another 12 minutes. A standing total that the 1907 medical column in The Gentlewoman would have described as potentially injurious to the lower limbs, with characteristic Edwardian understatement. Your ankles agree. Your ankles have been agreeing since Tuesday. The pressing board sits between the window and the wardrobe, close enough to the gas ring to stay warm, far enough from the silk evening gowns that a dropped iron is not also a catastrophe. Etiquette around the press board is unwritten. Everything useful is unwritten. You don't burn things. You don't scorch things. You don't let the iron sit too long. You don't press velvet from the front, ever, because velvet pressed from the front becomes slightly criminal, the pile flattened in a way that catches the light all wrong, like an accusation. Agnes in the house before this one pressed a velvet evening cape from the front once. Agnes is in retail now. The smell in this room is layered. The gas ring underneath, heated cotton rising sharp and clean, the faint sweet edge of violet powder from this morning, lavender from the pressed bags stored between folded petticoats in the pale wood wardrobe, and under all of it, faint and persistent, the slightly stale wool smell of your own skirt, which hasn't had time to air this week. You press the silk blouse last. You set the iron correctly, slower evaporation, Frances's temperature tested twice. You lay the cloth over the pin tucks. You move slowly. The blouse emerges flat and correct and faintly warm, the kind of warm that lasts exactly long enough to hang it before it fades and becomes just a blouse again, waiting for tonight. You keep, in a leather notebook bound in dark green, a written inventory of her wardrobe. The first column is the garment, the second is the maker, the third is the date of acquisition. The fourth, which is the column you check most often, is a list of social events at which the garment has already been worn, with names and dates. A gown cannot be worn twice to the same drawing room within the same season. The notebook prevents this. The notebook is, in a sense, one of the most powerful objects in the house. She has never read it. The entries are written in your smallest hand because space is limited and the social calendar is not. The Lucile afternoon gown, ivory crepe de chine with the pleated panels, acquired October 1904, altered at the waist twice, has been to the Devonshire's supper, Lady Whitmore's musical evening, the Marchioness of something's charity luncheon, and a garden party you attended as shadow, not guest. 4 events. The gown is nearly retired. One more outing and you'll be negotiating its future with Mrs. Levy on Petticoat Lane, who handles 2-season Lucile crepe with the brisk neutrality of a woman who has seen better gowns and worse. The correspondence side of this is yours too. You write, in her name, to the couturier's secretary. Lucile operates from 17 Hanover Square. Worth has a London address on Grosvenor Street. You specify the commission, request fabric samples, and note delivery requirements tied to the season circuit. London by April, travelling costume by July, the full winter order assembled before the house moves south. The couturier's secretary writes back to you. She addresses the letter to the maid. Neither of you acknowledges what this arrangement actually means. You are negotiating £1,000 wardrobes on behalf of a woman who will later tell her dinner companions she spent the morning resting. Mrs. Beale, the housekeeper, passes your door without knocking sometimes, which is technically a territorial breach and both of you know it. She doesn't ask about the notebook. Nobody asks about the notebook. The notebook is narrow, watchful, and quietly opinionated about who gets seated next to whom at supper, and the notebook will outlast all of them. The butler doesn't know what's in it. The mistress's husband, who funded most of its contents, has never seen the inside of her dressing room and has no reason to start now. The notebook sits on the dressing table beside the ceramic hair tidy and a pot of cold cream, radiating a quiet institutional confidence, like a very small comptroller of finance. The perquisite shelf at the back of your wardrobe has space for 3 more gowns. A gown that has been worn to 4 events and recorded in column 4 is, by the unspoken customs of the house, approaching your orbit. 2 seasons is the outer limit of fashionable use. After 2 seasons, the Worth evening gown, which cost £40 and was worn to 11 events beginning in spring 1903, migrates from her wardrobe to a tissue-wrapped bundle at the back of yours. You can wear it on your half-day, you can resell it, you can have it remade. A housemaid earns £14 a year. You've just received a garment that cost 3 times that, worn twice at the hem and once at the waist seam, which your own hands repaired. Edith, who held this position before you and left for a household in Edinburgh, kept a separate column for condition notes in red ink. You've adopted this. Pulled thread, right cuff. Reattached. Hook replaced, 3rd from hem. Stain, champagne treated immediately, no residue. The red ink makes the notebook look, from a distance, like it contains something medical. It does, in a way. It's a record of small damages sustained and repaired without comment, across hundreds of occasions, by one pair of hands. The red column is patient, exact, and reliably unflattering about the white silk. The notebook also contains, at the back, behind a folded sheet, a secondary list you've never discussed with anyone. It has no column headers. It is a list of names paired with event dates paired with garments. You are not certain what you're recording. You tell yourself it's a duplicate for reference. You've never needed to reference it. It stays folded, flat, behind the end paper. The notebook closes on it every evening. The clasp is small, brass, and holds. Twice a month you are sent across town to Lucile at 17 Hanover Square, or to Worth's London branch on Grosvenor Street, carrying a parcel of fabric swatches, a written instruction, or a measurement to be relayed. The shop assistants there know you by name. They do not know your mistress, because they have never seen her in person. She sends you. You wait in the back room with the swatches. You are offered tea in a cup that does not always match its saucer. You bring the answer home. Lucile's shop is all cream and grey, with the kind of carpeting that is plush, deep, and conspicuously self-important. It doesn't so much muffle sound as absorb it completely. including your footsteps, including your presence. Lady Duff Gordon has decorated it to feel less like a shop and more like a drawing room, which means it is a shop designed to feel like the place you just came from. You sit in the back room, which is where the carpet ends, and wait while a workroom assistant fetches the trim samples your mistress requested in Tuesday's letter. The assistant moves the way all workroom people move, purposefully, without acknowledging you directly, as though eye contact is a luxury item not included in your order. Worth's branch on Grosvenor Street is different, quieter. The carpet is darker, the light more controlled, the silence is more deliberate. A senior fitter named Miss Partridge takes your swatch parcel and sets it on a narrow table without opening it while you stand there. She then opens it slowly. This is not inefficiency. This is Worth. You've delivered packages here enough times to understand that the pace is the message, and the message is that you are not in a hurry, even when you are. The measurements are the delicate part. You carry them written in your own hand, waist, bust, shoulder width, and once a junior assistant at Lucile read them aloud in the workroom without lowering her voice, which is how you learned that sound travels very directly in a room with no furniture. You did not react. You folded the receipt, put it in your pocket, and said nothing. This is a skill. It's not taught anywhere, but the women who last in this work all have it. The couturier addresses their replies to your mistress, but they calibrate their tone based on you, whether you seem rushed, whether you correct a misquoted measurement, whether you appear to know the difference between the ivory moire and the ivory duchess satin in the swatch book, which you do, because you've been pressing both for 2 years and one of them lies flat and one of them does not. You know things about these fabrics that the fitters do not know, because you know what they do in a room at midnight by gaslight under a travelling iron on a Wednesday before a Thursday reception. The back rooms in both shops smell of sizing, cut silk and steam. A faint smell of chalk from the pattern cutters. The smell is warm, layered, and quietly industrious. It is not an unpleasant smell, but it is unmistakably a working smell, which is the only kind of smell you encounter in rooms where you are offered the mismatched teacup. Miss Partridge hands you Worth's reply, sealed, addressed to your mistress. You don't open it. You know what's in it anyway, because you drafted the question, and you know the range of possible answers, and before you reach the corner of Grosvenor Street you have already decided which 2 gowns are most likely from the described delivery window, which one will require the boning shifted at the left side seam, and whether the silk will hold the underskirt weight your mistress prefers, or need the cambric liner you always add without being asked. Miss Partridge does not know any of this. The letter is addressed to your mistress. The knowledge goes home with you. You stand, in total, between 8 and 10 hours of every working day, bending, lifting, lacing, pressing, fetching, climbing the back stairs in sets of 40 steps. The medical column of the Gentlewoman in 1907 ran a piece noting that varicose veins, lower back pain, and chronic foot inflammation were the 3 most common complaints among ladies' maids, and noted the conditions as occupational. The piece concluded that the conditions were manageable with proper rest. You read it once and folded the magazine back into the rack. You did not show it to anyone. The back stairs are not decorative. They are narrow, uncarpeted, and reliably steeper than the main staircase, smelling of beeswax mixed with turpentine, with a faint ammonia undertow drifting up from the butler's pantry 2 floors below. You use them exclusively. The family uses the main staircase, which is wide and soft underfoot and smells of cut flowers. The back stairs have no flowers. The back stairs have a railing that shifts slightly when you grip it on the 3rd floor turn, and it has shifted that way since March, and nobody has fixed it, and you no longer grip it. Your room is at the top. A lady's maid ranks above housemaids, which means your room is a degree less freezing. The difference is a smaller crack under the door and a slightly thicker blanket. The damp still settles into wool and brick by November, the kind of cold that doesn't feel cold until you lie down, at which point it announces itself from the mattress upward, slowly, with patience. You sleep 8 feet above a family that uses hot water bottles filled by someone else. Now, the tuberculosis. The 1901 census identified domestic servants as the occupational group with the highest TB death rate among women. The cause was not mysterious. You share a sleeping floor with 4 to 7 other women in rooms designed for storage that were repurposed for servants when the household expanded. The ventilation is theoretical. Agnes, the upper housemaid, has had a cough since October. It's February. Nobody uses the word for it. The word stays in the space between sentences, where the household keeps most of its facts. A varicose vein behind the left knee aches by mid-afternoon and burns by 8 in the evening. A lower back that tightens during the fourth dressing of the day. The dinner gown, always the dinner gown, with its hooks and its weight and the angle you hold for the lacing. A left wrist that clicks when you press hard with the flat iron. None of these are reported. Reporting a physical complaint requires a conversation with your mistress, and your mistress has opinions about the sturdiness of useful people. The varicose vein, on the other hand, has opinions about Tuesdays. The wrist has opinions about silk. Nobody asks any of them. Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, keeps a small pot of camphor liniment on the shelf above the kitchen passage. She doesn't offer it. She leaves the shelf unlocked. You take what you need and put the pot back at the same angle, and nothing is said. This is the closest thing to a health policy the house has. It works better than the article in The Gentlewoman. The standing itself has a texture to it by this point in your career. You've learned to shift weight without visibly shifting posture, one heel slightly lifted, then the other. A slow internal rotation. The mistress never notices while you're waiting for her to decide between the blue and the grey. 4 to 6 changes a day means 4 to 6 intervals of this. Standing adjacent to an open wardrobe, holding the next garment, being present without being noticed. The blue, it turns out. Always the blue by the third deliberation. You knew this before she did. You always know. That particular knowledge doesn't pay extra, but it does save approximately 4 minutes per change, which over a full season accumulates into something that feels, distantly, like time. The dressing room medicine chest is a mahogany cabinet with 3 small drawers and a single key, which lives on a thin chain inside your apron pocket. Inside the cabinet, Sol Volatile in a dark blue bottle, Laudanum in a brown one, Beecham's pills in a tin, Eno's fruit salts in a paper packet, and Dr. Mackenzie's improved harmless arsenic complexion wafers in a tin with a printed label. The arsenic wafers are advertised by name in society magazines and sold at most respectable chemists. You dispense from this cabinet, by request, between 3 and 5 times a day. The Sal Volatile is for headaches and nerves and the general sensation of being a wealthy woman in a tight corset in a house full of guests. You uncork the dark blue bottle and hold it at the correct distance, not so close that she recoils, not so far that it's theatrical. You have practiced this distance. There is a correct distance. You know it the way a pharmacist knows a dose, except you have no pharmacy training and the pharmacist went home hours ago. The laudanum is the quieter item in the cabinet. You don't offer it. You hand it when it's asked for. Your mistress has been asking for it regularly since the autumn party season and rather more regularly since January. The brown bottle is recorded in no inventory. It isn't a secret, it's legal, it's stocked at any chemist, it's dispensed at the recommended 5 drops in a little water, but a discreet maid does not discuss the rate of the refills with anyone below stairs, and a discreet maid certainly does not compare notes with the maid next door at the house on Eaton Square. You compare notes anyway. Her brown bottle is also refilling fast. This is not a conversation that happened. Now, let's talk about the arsenic wafers. Doctor. Mackenzie's improved harmless arsenic complexion wafers are not harmless, but the word harmless is right there on the tin in italic print, which carries significant social authority in 1904. They're meant to produce a clear, luminous complexion by doses of arsenic small enough to avoid acute poisoning and large enough to do something, although what exactly they do to the skin long-term is a question that the tin does not address. The tin has a florid illustration of a woman with a luminous complexion. She does not look like a woman who has been eating arsenic. You hand one over after breakfast, most mornings, with a glass of water. It's basically a goop drawer with fewer disclaimers and considerably more arsenic. A housemaid named Edith, one of the second-floor pair, once asked you what was in the locked cabinet, having noticed the key on your chain. You said, linens. Edith accepted this. The cabinet does not contain linens, but the cabinet's actual contents are not Edith's business, and the chain is there for a reason. And the reason is that confidentiality is the primary skill of this role, and confidentiality is not something you were explicitly hired for, but is something you would be instantly dismissed without a character for violating. The medicine chest's job is to make your mistress feel managed. That's the word, actually. Not cared for, managed. The Sal Volatile appears and the headache is acknowledged. The Eno's fruit salts effervesce in their glass with their small, cheerful fizz and the digestion is addressed. The Beecham's pills are taken as a matter of routine, the way some people now take a multivitamin, except Beecham's pills are largely aloe vera and ginger and an optimism about bowel function that borders on evangelical. The brown bottle appears when the brown bottle is requested. You are present for all of it. You are invisible for all of it. The key stays on the chain. The chain stays in the pocket. The pocket is on your person every waking hour. The key is small, brass, and reliably attentive to the weight of itself. You have never lost it. You have twice dreamed that you lost it, waking in the cold servant's wing with your hand already checking the apron hanging on the chair. The cabinet itself is small, dark, and reliably uncommunicative. It just locks. The brown bottle is the one you watch. Laudanum, sold legally without prescription, is the tincture she takes for her headaches and increasingly for her afternoons. She takes it from a small silver spoon you fill for her, twice a day, and sometimes 3. You keep the bottle topped up by visiting a chemist on Mount Street that does not require you to give your mistress's name. The other maids in the house do not know how often the bottle is refilled. The doctor who visits monthly does not know either. Only you know. You know other things too. You know which mornings she can't dress without her hands shaking slightly before the first spoon. You know the difference between a headache and a headache. The corset lacing on those mornings takes longer, not because the lacing is different, but because she needs to hold the bedpost a few seconds more than usual, and you give her those seconds without comment. The bodice hooks go in the same order they always go in. You don't rush. You don't ask. No registry advertisement has a clean name for this part of the work. You're not a nurse. The household already has a doctor visiting Thursdays who leaves a card on the hall table and is shown to the drawing room and not told anything useful. You're not a companion. Companions sit in the parlour and read aloud and are consulted about opera bookings. You are the person who is in the room before anyone else arrives and after everyone else has left, and you are therefore the person who knows what the room contains. The chemist on Mount Street is called Forsyth and Son. Mr. Forsyth the younger handles your account. He is quiet, exact, and reliably uninterested in conversation, the kind who tips a small amber bottle at exactly the right angle and doesn't look up while he does it. You pay from your own purse and are reimbursed from the household petty cash entered in the ledger under medical sundries. The ledger does not itemize. You itemize for yourself, in your head, in a column nobody else reads. Mr. Forsyth seals the paper bag with brown twine and slides it across the counter. He writes the entry in his book, date, item, price, and turns the book back toward the shelf. His handwriting is small, careful, and reliably uninterested in surnames. He does not ask for a name. He never has. The brown bottle has a paper label with the dose printed on it. The printed dose and the actual dose have a relationship that is roughly historical at this point. They once agreed, and they remember the arrangement fondly. You measure what she needs. Not what the label says. What she needs. You've recalibrated this over months. The way you've recalibrated the iron temperature and the tong heat and the exact tension of a laced corset on a difficult morning. Your hands have learned a great deal that your employment record will never reflect. Some things you do not learn. You don't learn what she thinks about in the afternoons when the tincture has softened everything. You don't ask. You bring the tea tray, you check the fire, you withdraw. A maid who stays in the room uninvited has misunderstood the job. A maid who is never there when needed has also misunderstood the job. The distance you maintain is not indifference. It is a very specific professional skill, and it is practiced daily, and it has no line in the wage book. You refill the bottle on Tuesday. It is Monday. You know her body the way the doctor does not. You know the small mole below her left collarbone, the scar from the riding fall in 1894, the way her left shoulder sits slightly higher than her right, the bruise that appeared this Tuesday and is fading the way bruises fade. You have undressed her every night for 7 years. There is no information about her physical self that you do not have, and there is no person in the world, including her husband, who carries the same inventory. None of it has ever been written down. The corset tells you things. You've laced it daily since the first week, the same whalebone, the same backlacing, the same target of 20 to 22 inches, give or take a held breath. You know which inch tighter makes her wince and which inch looser means she's been unwell. You know the exact angle of her left hip when the boning is irritating the old bruising, because her whole posture shifts half an inch, and she doesn't mention it, and you don't ask. The corset has been recording her condition for 7 years. You have been reading it. You don't discuss her body with the housekeeper. You don't discuss it with her personal physician, doctor. Everett, who visits quarterly and asks her questions in a drawing room while you stand outside the door. Dr. Everett has a stethoscope and a medical degree. You have 7 years of standing behind her at 6:45 in the morning. The difference in quality of information is not in his favour. Margaret, the head housemaid, watches you sometimes in the corridor with an expression she believes is unreadable. It is not unreadable. You've been reading faces in this house for nearly a decade. Her face is wary, narrow, and quietly inquisitive about what you carry. She's wondering what you know. The answer is more than she can imagine, and none of it available for general circulation. On Thursday, she stands at the landing pretending to polish the banister rail, the cloth moving in slow, careful, deliberately unhurried circles over the same 6 inches of mahogany. Her left thumb rides the edge of the rail. Her right wrist barely turns. She is not polishing. She is positioned. When you pass with the morning tea tray, her eyes stay on the wood and her cloth does not change its rhythm, which is how you know she heard the bedroom door close at 1:12 last night and is still working out the arithmetic. The bruise, though. The bruise requires its own kind of silence, a calibrated, specific, active silence that is quite different from the ordinary silence of doing your job. You have seen 3 bruises in 7 years that appeared in locations that didn't align with the explanation offered. The first time, you noted it. The second time, you noted it again. The third time, you packed her trunks for a visit to her sister in Bath, with a thoroughness that suggested a longer stay than the 3 days on the schedule, and she looked at you in the mirror and neither of you said a single word, and she stayed for 10 days. No word in the household handbook covers what you did with that trunk. The registry description is short and tidy. Lady's maid, dressing, hairdressing, wardrobe maintenance, travel arrangements. Not, reads the room. Not, packs for contingencies. Not, chooses, alone, on a Wednesday, to fold 10 days of clothing into a 3-day trunk and say nothing about the discrepancy. You are, in the language of 1907, a servant. That word does most of the legwork. What that word doesn't cover is Tuesday morning's 8 o'clock lacing. You knew by the resistance at the 8th eyelet that she had cried before you came in. You did not mention this. She did not mention this. The corset, which would have mentioned it, was being held closed by you, by the laces, and by a professional silence that has no entry anywhere. And she knows you know. That's the thing that never gets written down either. 7 years of standing behind someone at a dressing table produces a fluency that can't be faked and can't be replaced with a newer maid who comes with French training and excellent references. Lady Clifton down at Grosvenor Square dismissed her lady's maid of 4 years last spring over a matter of punctuality. She has a new girl now, perfectly competent with better French. She has not looked comfortable in a single gown since March. The old maid knew about the shoulder. The new one is still learning. Letters arrive for her in the morning post and sit, opened, on the dressing table while she is downstairs at breakfast. You see the handwriting on the envelopes. You see the first lines, sometimes the whole letters, because you are tidying the table and the letters are face up and your eyes cannot help being open. You know, without being told, who is writing to her and approximately why. The knowledge sits in your head as quietly as the wardrobe inventory sits in your notebook. You have never repeated any of it to anyone. What you know is sorted by handwriting. The solicitor's hand arrives on the 1st of each month in a cream envelope with a printed return address. You know the handwriting of a man who is not her husband, which arrives less regularly and has no return address at all. You know the handwriting of her sister, who underlines things. The handwriting of the man with no return address is small, careful, and quietly attentive to the loops of the lowercase letters. The handwriting of the sister is the opposite. The letters are not hidden from you because hiding things from the maid has never, in the history of this household, worked for very long. You also know the small sounds of the house at night because your room is on the floor above the family bedrooms and sound travels through plaster in this building with a complete lack of discretion. You know what time her husband closes his dressing room door. You know what time he opens it again. The plaster has no opinion about confidentiality. Neither do the floorboards on the landing, which are old, dry, and reliably noisy. A door at 2 in the morning sounds different from a door at 11, and you know the difference because you stopped sleeping through either of them in your first autumn here. Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, knows different things. She knows the grocery account and the coal delivery and which footman has been taking sugar from the stores. The butler knows the wine cellar and the front-of-house arrangements, and approximately how much everything costs. You know the mistress. That is your department. It is, in its way, the most thoroughly informed department in the house, and the only one without a ledger. It is not written in the household hierarchy anywhere, but everyone in the house understands it the same way they understand where the back stairs go. You are not her confidant. She has never sat you down and told you things. You have simply been present, every morning, for 9 years, in a room no larger than a modest parlour, while a person assembles themselves for the day. Intimacy at that proximity and frequency accumulates on its own. It builds, settles, and quietly hardens into furniture. It doesn't ask permission. Now and then she volunteers something. She is fastening her bracelet in the glass, and she says, without looking at you, that she won't be needing the evening gown this week after all. The cancelled dinner tells you something. The way she says it tells you more. You make a note in the wardrobe book, evening gown, not required, 3rd week of November, and you do not ask about the dinner. The knowledge is not power. Exactly. It doesn't function like power in any direction you can use. You can't spend it, can't leverage it, can't set it down and walk away from it. It lives in you the way the smell of the spirit lamp lives in your hair by the end of a dressing. Persistent, attached. Not unwelcome, not welcome. Just there. Sometimes a letter arrives that you don't read because it's already been folded and placed face down, which tells you something too. She has anticipated your eyes. This happens occasionally and means she has thought about you while you weren't in the room, which is, in 9 years of service, a rarer thing than you might expect. 3 months in the south of France requires, by her preference, between 15 and 30 trunks. The trunks are flat-sided Louis Vuitton, designed in Paris in the 1870s precisely so they could be stacked in the holds of ships and the guards' vans of trains. Each trunk is packed by you, according to a system you have refined over 4 winters, morning gowns and shoes in one, evening gowns and accessories in another, day dresses and walking suits divided by weight, hats in their own round case, gloves in a flat tray, jewellery on your person. The jewellery travels on your person because your person is insured by nobody, and therefore replaceable at lower cost. The trunks are insured. This is the hierarchy stated in practical terms. The packing itself is patient, precise, and quietly recursive. The evening gowns go in first, tissue layered, bodice down, skirt folded in thirds to avoid the seams taking a permanent crease. Each silk piece is separated from the next by a length of plain cotton because silk stored against silk will eventually decide to become one garment, and 2 gowns fused at the hip is not a silhouette anyone has requested. The shoes are wrapped in chamois and wedged at the corners where the lid leaves a gap. The lavender bags go between the layers, small cloth sachets, dried tight, which will make everything smell exactly like a grandmother you don't have. The medicine chest packs separately. Sal Volatile, Beecham's pills, Eno's fruit salts, and a brown glass bottle of laudanum, legal and present, nestled next to Doctor. Mackenzie's improved harmless arsenic complexion wafers, which are sold by name in society magazines and described as harmless in the name itself, which should probably tell you something. You pack the medicine chest last and carry the key. This is not a policy anyone has stated aloud. It is an understanding. The loading is its own production. The footmen carry. You direct. This is an important distinction because the footman will stack a hat trunk beneath a steamer trunk given any opportunity, and the result will be a hat trunk that no longer does its primary job. A footman named Gerald once stacked the hat boxes under 3 evening trunks on the platform at Charing Cross and then looked at you with the sincere expression of someone who has genuinely never considered that hats have a structure. Gerald is no longer in this household. On the ship, your mistress travels first class. You travel in Cunard's servant accommodation, which is a category that exists below second class in the way that second class exists below first, theoretically the same vessel, practically a different destination. The porthole, if you have one, faces the waterline. The crossing takes 4 days if the weather holds. It often doesn't hold. The trunks are in the hold below you, presumably doing better. At Biarritz or Monte Carlo, the trunks are unloaded by hotel staff who carry them with the aggressive confidence of men who have never been asked to account for a broken seam. The senior porter at the Hôtel de Paris is named Henri. and Henri grips the leather handle of trunk number 9 with a particular angled wrist that places the weight on his own forearm rather than the brass cornering, which means he has handled trunk number 9 before, which means he knows you will be watching. He nods at you exactly once on arrival, a brief, deliberate, and entirely transactional nod that translates accurately as I see you counting. He nods at nobody else. You are present for the unloading. You count. You have always counted. 27 trunks go into the hold at Southampton. 27 trunks come out at the other end, or you begin a conversation that will last until someone finds the missing one in a railway station in Lyon, which is where missing trunks always seem to end up, sitting on a platform with a vaguely apologetic air, as if they wandered off and lost track of time. The missing trunk is patient, sheepish, and reliably innocent of the whole thing. The unpacking takes most of a day. You hang, you smooth, you inventory. The gowns are checked for travel damage, a pulled thread at a seam, a crushed pleat that needs steaming, a hat brim that has made a unilateral decision about its own shape. The medicine chest goes onto the dressing table. The key stays with you. She will stay 3 months. You will pack and unpack 3 times in those 3 months. Arrival, a fortnight in Nice, return. The trunks do not get lighter between trips. They are, if anything, more confident. At the Hotel de Paris in Monte Carlo, her room overlooks the sea, with silk wall coverings and a private bathroom installed in the 1890s. Your room is at the end of a corridor on the floor above, with a shared privy and a window that opens onto a service courtyard. The corridor smells of stored linen and faintly of a kitchen 2 floors below. The hotel staff, who are French, treat the English servants as a subordinate class with no particular consideration, which is a thing the English servants notice and the English mistresses do not. The service entrance is not a door, it is a statement. You enter through it every time you leave the building and every time you return, regardless of the weather, regardless of what you're carrying, regardless of the fact that you have just personally supervised the transport of 15 trunks across 2 countries and a sea crossing. The doorman at the front holds it open for the mistress. He has not looked at you directly since Tuesday. The French hotel hierarchy runs on its own logic, and that logic does not include you. The femmes de chambre have their floor and their assignments and their opinions about English ladies' maids, which they express through a specific kind of polite non-acknowledgement that requires real skill to execute. A chambermaid named Celeste hands you a set of extra towels in the corridor outside your room. She does it without slowing down. The towels land in your arms and she is already gone, her back expressing mild contempt. Your French, here, has been quietly reclassified. At home, your French is a professional credential. Up to £80 a year if it's convincing, which yours is, convincing enough for correspondence with couturiers, convincing enough for the lady magazine registry forms. Here, in actual France, it is immediately reassessed. The concierge switches to slow, careful English when you speak to him. He does this gently. It does not land gently. Your meals are taken in a small staff dining room behind the kitchen, at a table that also accommodates the visiting valets of 2 English lords, 1 German courier, and a Scottish nanny who has been at the hotel for 3 weeks and has formed opinions about the seating arrangement that she shares freely. The Scottish nanny is voluble, prompt, and reliably underemployed by her opinions. The food is good, actually. Better than the servants' hall in most country houses. This fact is annoying to acknowledge because the rest of the situation is not good, and you would prefer a unified complaint. Meanwhile, upstairs, the mistress is having dinner on the terrace. The terrace has a view of the harbour. She will describe it to you later while you unhook the 37 hooks and eyes on her evening bodice, and you will say how lovely, ma'am, in the tone that means you are present in the room and not elsewhere. The hooks and eyes don't care about the view, neither, at this hour, do you? The travel does have its uses, dispersed, modest, and reliably unphotographed. You've seen Monte Carlo, Nice, Biarritz, Rome, the travel resume of a mid-tier influencer in 1907, except the content is entirely other people's luggage, and nobody is photographing you. You know which hotels on the Riviera put servants in rooms with actual ventilation, and which ones have a corridor that fogs with damp by February. You know the names of the porters who are reliable and the ones who need watching. You know that the Hotel Negresco in Nice has a better servants' dining room than the Hotel de Paris, and you know this from personal experience, which is a form of expertise that has no name and no market value. The mistress asks, the following morning, whether you've been comfortable. She asks this while you heat the curling tongs over the spirit lamp, the small alcoholic flame warming the steel, the familiar slightly acrid smell mixing with her violet powder. You say yes, ma'am. The tongs are nearly ready. The rat, her own combings, saved across 6 weeks and packed in its own small box, sits on the dressing table waiting. The day begins the same way it begins everywhere. The room is different. The work is identical. You travel a circuit that does not vary. London from April through the end of July for the season, Scotland for grouse shooting from the 12th of August through September, the country house in autumn, Monte Carlo or Biarritz or the Italian Riviera in winter, Ireland for spring hunting. You pack the trunks before each move. You unpack them at the other end. You have not slept in the same bed for more than 5 consecutive months since 1903. Your address, as recorded in the registry office, is the registry office. The trunks are flat-sided, brass-cornered, and reliably heavier than they look. There are 15 of them at minimum, 30 at the upper end. Louis Vuitton, flat-sided, designed specifically to stack in a ship's hold without shifting, which is elegant foresight if you're the person who owns them, and considerably less elegant if you're the person supervising their loading at Southampton at 6:30 in the morning, while the dock wind comes off the water and finds every gap in your coat. Each trunk is numbered. Each trunk has a corresponding page in your inventory ledger. You know what is in every one. Your mistress does not. She has not needed to. The packing itself is an act of controlled prediction. You are not packing for the weather. You are packing for the social calendar, what she will need, in what order, for events that haven't happened yet, in a place you haven't arrived at, based on a schedule that will change twice before you clear the channel. A ball gown in trunk 7. The tea gown she will want on the 3rd afternoon when the other tea gown develops a pulled thread. The walking dress for the Thursday excursion she hasn't confirmed. You fold the tissue paper in at the corners. The lavender bags go between the layers. The beaded evening bodice is wrapped individually, face inward, so nothing catches. The whole circuit runs on advanced preparation, narrow margins, and your handwriting in column 4 of the inventory. The glorious 12th is what the shooting parties call the 12th of August, the opening of grouse season in Scotland, with a reverence that suggests they believe the grouse are also looking forward to it. Your mistress's husband has been excited about this since approximately March. You have been preparing the appropriate Highland wardrobe since July. The tweed walking suits need their buttons checked. The heavy boots need dubbing. There is a specific wool cape that only travels to Scotland and lives the rest of the year at the back of the fitted wardrobe, smelling faintly of heather and quiet resentment. The annual calendar itself, when you think about it, has a strong and unwavering position on August, on Scotland, and on what is expected of a person with 30 trunks and a quarter hour to make the Euston train, Mrs. Aldridge, the housekeeper at the London house, hands you the trunk manifests with the expression of someone completing a transaction she's relieved to pass on. She writes neatly, she signs her initials at the bottom, she does not travel, she does not have to. You have sometimes, on particularly long sea crossings, thought about what it would be like to stay behind in a house that doesn't move. The thought passes. The RMS Mauretania crosses to New York in 4 days and 10 hours, which is a fact the men at dinner repeat to each other several times, as though it gets more impressive each telling. You cross in servant accommodation. It is not the Mauretania's finest hour, structurally speaking. You sleep in a narrow berth with your coat folded under your head because the pillow has made a decision about comfort that you don't agree with. A steward named Maguire walks the servant corridor at 5:30 each morning with a metal tray of small enamelled tea mugs, setting yours down on the ledge outside the cabin door at precisely the angle that ensures it will not slide when the ship rolls, and then continuing without knocking, which is the most considerate gesture available to him at that hour. The mug is warm, dented, and reliably present. The spirit lamp is packed. The curling tongs are packed. The morning dressing routine begins again at whatever hour the ship's motion allows. The circuit doesn't pause for your preferences. It doesn't pause for illness or for the letter that arrived last February from your mother, or for the particular exhaustion that sets in somewhere between the country house and the Riviera that isn't tiredness exactly, more like the sensation of being very good at something that will never quite belong to you. You've seen Monte Carlo, you've seen Biarritz. You have seen the Italian Riviera from a servant's window on the ground floor of a villa that costs more per month than your annual wage. The season ends in July. The trunks come out again. You check the inventory. You begin. Your room at this house is on the top floor under the eaves. It is 6 feet by 10 feet, with a single small window, a narrow iron bed, a washstand with a chipped enamel jug, a wooden chair, and one hook on the back of the door for your coat. There is no fire. The cold in winter is the specific damp cold of a London top floor, which settles into the wool blanket and into the brick wall behind it, and does not lift even on the warmer days. You sleep in it nonetheless. Downstairs, the family sleeps in rooms that have names. The blue room, the Chinese bedroom. The guest suite with the view over the south lawn and the writing desk and the silk counterpane and the fire that a housemaid lit at 6 in the morning so it would be warm by 8. Your room doesn't have a name. It has a number written in pencil on a card above the door. The number is 7. The smell in this room is not the dressing room smell, not the rose water, not the violet powder, not the small alcoholic bite of the spirit lamp in the morning. Your room smells of damp wool and the tallow candle you use because gas hasn't been extended to the top floor, and something faintly fungal in the far corner that was there before you arrived and will be there after you leave. The wall behind the washstand sweats in November. You have placed your Bible in front of it, which has not helped the Bible. The housemaids sleep 2 to a room along this corridor. The kitchen maids are 1 floor below, which is warmer and also smells worse. You are here alone, which is the ladies' maid's distinction, private quarters, however theoretical the privacy, and in daylight hours you understand why this is considered a privilege. At 2 in the morning in January, Agnes Collett, who has been a lady's maid at houses like this for 11 years, understands it as a technical matter only. The 1901 census listed domestic servants as the female occupational group with the highest tuberculosis death rate. The census did not note the damp. It didn't need to. The damp was understood. You earn £35 a year, more than the housemaids, considerably more than the kitchen maids. You have seen Monte Carlo, which they haven't. You are wearing, on your half-day Thursday, a walking suit that started life as your mistress's Lucile and still has most of its buttons. These are facts. Also a fact, you have been standing for 9 hours, your lower back has a specific opinion about the iron this morning, and the single window in room 7 faces north. The washstand jug holds cold water. It held cold water yesterday. The jug is chipped, ancient, and reliably indifferent. Bessie, the 3rd housemaid, comes past your open door at 6 in the morning with the corridor's shared water can, refilling jugs as she goes. She lifts your jug with both hands, tips a careful inch of water in, sets it down, and pauses to press her palm flat against the top of the jug for the space of 1 breath, as if testing whether the cold has decided anything overnight. The cold has not. She moves on without speaking. The print of her hand is gone from the enamel before you've sat up. There is a bathroom on the family floor with a copper tub and a geyser that produces hot water on demand. You know this because you have run it for your mistress every evening for 3 years. The tub has claw feet and a broad rim and a small brass soap dish. The soap is pears. You know this also. Missus. Hartley, the housekeeper, passes your door at 10:30 each night on her way to her own room, which has a fire and a carpet and is on the floor below. She pauses sometimes, not to speak, just to listen, in the way a person listens to a house they are responsible for, checking it, taking inventory. Her footsteps are the last sound on the corridor. Then they stop. Then there is only the wind under the eaves, which at this house in this season sounds like something that hasn't fully decided what it wants to do yet. You pull the wool blanket up. The blanket has been washed so many times it has lost the intention of warmth and retained only the shape of it. You are asleep before the candle gutters. Tomorrow is a Tuesday, which means a full morning change, a luncheon, an afternoon call, and if the weather holds, a walk in the park requiring the green wool costume with the 17 hooks. You know where all 17 are. You could find them in the dark. You nearly have. Domestic servants, the 1901 census reports, die of tuberculosis at a higher rate than any other female occupational group in England and Wales. The medical authorities attribute the rate to overcrowded sleeping quarters rather than to working conditions themselves. You read this in a pamphlet that came through the servants' hall last spring. You folded the pamphlet and put it in the drawer with the wardrobe inventory. 3 housemaids on the floor above you share a single room. One of them has had a cough since November. The pamphlet does not name her. The cough has a pattern now. You know it the way you know the squeak on the 3rd stair. It is patient, regular and reliably itself. It starts around 4 in the morning, travels down through the floorboards, and stops. The floorboards above your head have learnt its schedule the way an old clock learns the household. 3 soft, 2 sharp, a pause, 1 more. Done. The boards have made room for it. You lie in the dark and wait for it to stop. It stops. You get up at 6:30. The servants' attic runs the length of the house, divided by thin partition walls that don't reach the ceiling. Sound passes over the top of them freely, as if the partitions are suggestions. You can hear Agnes Collett in room 9 rolling over in her bed. You can hear the head housemaid's alarm clock. You can hear the cough from the room above yours the same way you'd hear someone talking in the next pew, clearly, without distance, without any real separation between you and whatever is making the sound. The ventilation is architectural optimism. 1 sash window per room, painted shut in rooms 6, 8, and 10, because the wood has swollen and nobody from the house side has come up to look at it. The Gentlewoman's Medical column in 1907 will recommend fresh air and a reduction of domestic crowding as primary preventatives. The window in room 8 doesn't open. This is not mentioned in the column. Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper, handles it by not handling it. She has been in service since 1882, which means she has developed a highly specific capacity for not noticing things on the top floor. When Edith, the second housemaid, started looking thin in February, Mrs. Hartwell noted that Edith seemed tired and suggested iron tonic from the kitchen stores. The iron tonic is Beecham's pills. They are for digestion. Nobody says this out loud. You are not on the upper floor. Your room is 1 flight below the housemaid's, which is not safety. It is slightly better ventilation and slightly more floor space, which the house did not give you out of generosity. It came with the rank. A lady's maid ranks above a housemaid in this building, and what that means in practice is a room with a ceiling you can stand up in and a window that opens from the bottom. You open it every morning regardless of weather. The window has opinions about February. You open it anyway. The Women's Industrial Council published its investigation in 1902 and again in 1910, using the same 3 words both times: quasi-feudal dependency. The reports were dispatched, reviewed, and reliably ignored. A copy of the 1902 pamphlet sat in the servants' hall for 3 weeks, before someone, you don't know who, used it to wedge a window. What you do is practical. You keep your room dry by leaving the window cracked, by not storing damp things against the wall, by airing your bedding on the sill when the housemaids aren't watching, because watching each other is one of the few entertainments available at this altitude. You know which rooms are warm and which are cold and which ones have a resident cough that has been present since before Christmas. You know this the way you know the wardrobe inventory, by paying attention and writing nothing down. The papers this year have begun to talk about something called super tax, introduced by Mr. Lloyd George in the budget of 1909, levied on incomes over £5,000. The mistress's husband has incomes well over £5,000. He has, however, been quieter at dinner than he used to be. The estate at Longleat let 2 under-housemaids go in October. Mrs. Hunt's agency reports more applicants and fewer vacancies this season. You are 31 years old. You have not until very recently thought about what you would do if this house no longer required you. What you actually have, leaving the wages aside, is portable, modest, and quietly considerable. £38 a year is respectable, more than most women in most rooms will ever see. What you have is a list of addresses: Paris, Edinburgh, Monte Carlo twice, Biarritz in the winter of 1906 when the sea was genuinely alarming. You have corresponded with Lucile's workroom on Hanover Square on your mistress's behalf and negotiated a replacement sleeve panel without your mistress knowing a replacement was necessary. You have packed and supervised 31 trunks onto a Channel ferry in a rain that had opinions. You have, through necessity, learned more French than the registry forms suggest is typical. The exit routes are narrow, but they exist. A French-trained maid, or a maid who can be convincingly described as French-adjacent, can open a small dressmaking establishment, the kind that lives at a respectable address and receives clients by appointment rather than storefront. Agnes Fowler, who left Lady Maynard's household 2 seasons ago, is reportedly doing exactly this from rooms near Marylebone High Street. You have not spoken to Agnes Fowler. You know about Agnes Fowler the way you know most things in this house, through inference and the back stairs. The character reference hangs over all of it. 1 letter, 1 woman's handwriting. No oversight from anybody external to this household, and none expected. The character is not a recommendation. It is closer to a passport, except the passport is held by someone who can revoke it in the event of a morning when you suggest, unbidden, that the green evening gown might need letting out. You do not suggest. You have not suggested in 4 years. The green evening gown has been quietly altered 3 times, and the written inventory notes only that it was worn to the Hartfields in February and the Duchesses in March. Margaret Tench, who currently holds the position at Harrowfield House 2 streets over, came to service from a schoolteacher's family. She is 28. She's been reading advertisements in The Lady for companion positions, which pay less but allow a sitting room and evenings that are genuinely yours. She mentioned this on a Tuesday afternoon in the park, walking 2 steps ahead of you, looking at the gravel. The companion option is a kind of managed retreat, smaller wages, smaller work, smaller chance of standing 8 hours in a ship's galley corridor counting trunks in the dark. The super tax isn't why everything is changing. It's just why it's changing now, in a way that makes the change visible. The large household is an expensive object to maintain, and the people's budget has given the expensive object's owners a formal reason to notice what it costs. 2 under-housemaids in October. A 3rd footman not replaced at Chatsworth, according to Mrs. Hunt's last circular. The laundry sent out rather than done in-house at 3 other addresses, you know. If you left tomorrow, what you would take is small. The green inventory notebook with the 7 years of pencil entries in your own hand, the dove-grey shawl that came down from the cast-offs in 1905 and has kept its shape better than most of the gowns it travelled with, and the small brass key to the medicine chest that was issued to you on a Tuesday in 1903 and has lived on a ribbon around your neck since. The key isn't yours. The notebook isn't yours. The shawl technically isn't either, but the inventory inside the notebook is, and that you would take with you whether the cover came along or not. Mrs. Purvis, passing in the corridor with the morning keys, gives you the smallest nod, not a greeting, not quite an acknowledgement, just the brief recognition of another person who has been at this for a long time and is also doing the arithmetic this morning. The nod takes less than a second. You receive it like change. You fold the morning paper and set it on the tray. The paper is thin, cheap, and quietly insistent about the future. Downstairs, Edith is coughing again. The mistress will ring in 20 minutes. The curling tongs are already heating on the spirit lamp, and the room smells of warm metal and violet powder and something slightly ahead of whatever comes next. And so here you are at the end of it. You heated the tongs without scorching anything. You laced the corset, aimed for 22 inches, and said nothing through the held breath. You washed the silk stockings by hand in tepid water with a single shaving of Castile soap. You built a rat from saved combings, packed 30 trunks for the Riviera, and dispensed laudanum from the brown bottle without comment. You did this 6 days a week for 7 years. Nobody wrote it down. Mrs. Hunt's ledger has your name, your character, and some French beside it, and that is the whole record. Thank you for spending this hour with the backstairs, the dressing table, and the green inventory notebook. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tongs cool on the dressing table. Let the house go quiet around you. Sleep well.